Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm and you are watching the first part of What If Broken Naruto was trained by Kyuubi. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no time, let's start the story.
What was the man contemplating? The boy was a newborn. There was no family or name to mention, and nobody even knew the child's origins. And nobody would interact with him if they knew what he held. The child, still with the seal on his belly, was sleeping in the basket in front of the white-haired balding man seated behind the desk. After learning that the Yondiami had been discovered dead, holding the child in his arms, in the middle of the battlefield strewn with the bodies of the other Leaf Nin, a nurse briefly took him in after an attempted assassination. It was easy to guess what had happened because the child still had traces of the Kyuubi's energy swirling around them. He could compel a family to take him, but the city and ranks were already rife with animosity toward the lone survivor of the great tragedy. Although he was already in a vulnerable situation, he wished he could keep the child with him. Since no one else was available at the time and they needed to maintain a strong front despite the significant loss, he had reclaimed the role of Hokage. This child sleeping in front of him and sucking on his thumb was the worst thing he had ever had to deal with. The only option the Hokage could think of was an adoption home. His secretary had already ordered a list of them. He would locate one in the morning and enact legislation requiring the boy to be treated like any other. Anyone who opposed the child would have to face the city's most powerful nin. Knowing that the whisker lines on his cheeks would serve as a reminder of who he was to anyone who looked upon him, he wondered if they would eventually fade or thicken. When he touched the infant's cheek with his finger, the boy briefly opened his eyes. His young, bright blue eyes and his old, green eyes met. Since the law also applied to him, he offered the child the final gift he could ever give. He glanced at the other images of the former Hokage and said, "Uzumaki Naruto, they will never realize how great a hero you actually are. You have quite a future ahead of you, don't disappoint me." Or him, he said, glancing at the latest. The infant had already fallen back asleep when he turned to face him again. However, the Hokage had fervently hoped for a bright and hopeful future, but this was not to be. The boy had to designate 2 Anbu to secretly watch over him in case anyone threatened his life after more attempts on his life. However, the Anbu could only do so much, so they would stand by while the boy was kicked, slapped out of the way, verbally abused, and subjected to stones and other objects. It wasn't much better at the orphanage. He received the leftover scrapings and was always at the back of the line for food. The adults did nothing to stop the other kids from making fun of him because of his whisker marks, but if he tried to defend himself, he was punished until he didn't fight back at all, just accepting the bruises and blows that went away in the morning for reasons he couldn't explain. The kids did everything in their power to make the boy's life miserable after witnessing how the adults treated him. Anything he attempted to keep was taken away from him, and he was not permitted to have any personal belongings. He wore a set of bright orange clothes that no one had wanted, but he didn't care that they were old clothes that had been donated to the orphanage. To put it briefly, the boy was broken and sought solace in libraries. Although he was never permitted to remove the books, he would find a book in a corner and read for hours on end. This was the only time the boy ever smiled. His heart ached a little more each time he recalled his life after assuming the roles of a knight, a mage, or a Roroni and having to put the book down. He was the only one who looked out for him, but he sensed something trying to come out of him. It was powerful and furious. However, it wasn't upset with him. Rather, it was upset with everyone else, with those who had broken his spirit so long ago and done this to him. Naruto had finally saved up enough cash to purchase a book of his own, something he had always desired, one evening when he was 10 years old and was making his way back from a bookstore. It was merely a small fantasy about a ninja who never gave up and never broke his word, using everything he had to protect his village's residents because they were his most valuable possessions. He aspired to be strong, like the man, and to at least get a smile from others. At that moment, he bumped into a man and collapsed, dropping the book from his grasp. Roughly, he was seized and hoisted into the air. "Watch where you're going, runt," the inebriated man said, pausing to identify the child he was pointing to. The fox brat was going to love this, so he gave the boy a sly smile and punched him in the stomach. As he was dropped and crumpled to the ground, clutching his belly, tears welling up in his eyes, Naruto, on the other hand, just wanted to be left alone. When he noticed the book on the floor, he reached over with a shaking hand to retrieve it. All he wanted was to keep it safe. However, the man refused to let him. He stepped on the boy's wrist and applied more pressure until Naruto was whimpering in agony. Despite knowing that this would only cause more pain, he chose not to cry out, but the man continued. He picked up the book by reaching down. The man was only interested in using it as an excuse to punish the boy. "What is this?" "Did you steal this?" he asked. He was enraged after seeing the title. In his rage, the man halted down on the wrist and grinned at the satisfying snapping of bone and whimpering, but what Naruto had mistakenly believed to be a fantasy book turned out to be The Young Life of the Yondaime. "I might have gone easier on you, but not now. You killed this man." Naruto was unable to comprehend. All he wanted was to be left alone, return to the orphanage that detested him, and read the book under the moonlight. He knew that his wrist was broken and that it would heal, but that didn't make the pain any less intense. It wasn't the first time. A few months prior, he had been shoved down the stairs and suffered a broken leg that took 2 days to heal. The man was kicking him in the stomach and talking, but Naruto was losing consciousness. He felt as though he was falling, and when he realized that no one was going to save him, his eyes went glassy. When Naruto heard the words, he didn't understand them. He opened his eyes to find himself standing in front of a large cage and looked around in confusion. Pitiful, to think that I'm trapped within such a weak body. Naruto stepped back in surprise as the voice said, "In here, boy." From the other side of the bars, a light shone. Naruto had never seen anything so enormous in his life. The enormous fox, with its 9 tails all around it, lay there with its head against the cage, its red eyes watching the boy. The only explanation he could come up with was, "Am I dead?" Dirty water dripped from rusted pipes that emerged from the walls, soaking him shin deep. The smell was awful and barely bearable, and the air was humid. Naruto was shaken to his very core by the strong voice that said, "No, and I plan to make sure that you don't end up that way." Pictures of the great fox's memories flashed around Naruto, including one of a man riding a great toad into battle surrounded by ninja, all of whom were wearing the leaf head protector. "I am the Kyuubi, sealed within your body because of the 4th Hokage's actions 10 years ago." There was a hint of laughter in the voice as red chakra slipped beneath the cage's bars and swirled up around Naruto. "We will talk later, but for now you have a book to recover." When Naruto opened his eyes and was kicked back into an ally wall, he felt a sharp pain in his stomach. He had multiple broken ribs, a bruised and battered body, and what felt like a fractured leg. Although he was a little tired from constantly beating this child, the man was still furious and had no intention of stopping anytime soon. Naruto began to struggle to his feet after coughing and spitting up some blood. The man hurried over to Naruto, who was leaning against the wall with his right wrist still broken and in a lot of pain. "So, you still want more, huh, stupid brat?" Naruto felt something inside of him, called power. Naruto reacted by reaching up and catching the man's fist as it approached him, his tiny fingers gripping it and refusing to release it. When the man tried to free his hand from the boy's hold, he found that both the boy and his fist were very unyielding. Naruto felt the new strength and power he had inside of him, and he was shocked to see the red energy coursing through him. His wrist, leg, and ribs all healed very quickly. He was aware that he needed to retrieve his book. He pulled and squeezed, causing the man's finger to break under the strain and cause him to scream in agony. However, as he was drawn forward, he noticed a red glow emanating from the boy's other hand, and his eyes widened in surprise. When the man was within range, Naruto's arm bounded out, and he released his other hand, slamming his fist into the center of the man's chest. The man was flung back against the alleyway's opposite wall. He tasted blood in his mouth and coughed, but he was in pain. The blow had cracked several of his ribs, and he was having a terrible time breathing. The little demon child was approaching him when he looked up, and the look in his eyes made him shudder in terror. Naruto turned his attention to the man before him. All of a sudden, his senses were much better. He could smell the fear in the man's sweat and see the expression in his eyes. He became aware that the village residents had projected fear in addition to hatred at him as he moved forward in their direction. Cradling his broken hand, the man stammered, "Dadoa, don't hurt me." Never in his life had he been so terrified. I could feel the power the little boy produced. Nothing should be permitted to exist with that much power. Please ya. Don't hurt me. Naruto turned to face the man who was directly in front of him. Leaning down, he picked up the book that had dropped from his grasp. Sensing that something was observing them, he stood and glanced up at the building. He took his book and went back to the orphanage, knowing that his life had changed significantly, but in reality, he didn't care. The two Anbu who had been observing Naruto sped across the buildings in the direction of the Hokage's offices. The boy had used the Kyuubi's power, which shouldn't have been possible, and he had to be told. Immediately, things began to change. Naruto ran up to his room after returning to the orphanage and took a seat in his favorite reading nook with his book. Unfortunately, Naruto was soon spotted carrying the book by some of the older bullies who teased him, and they decided to go have some fun. Naruto, who was completely engrossed in the book and apparently hadn't noticed any of the bullies, was confronted by Karyudo, the biggest of them. He demanded the book with a stout hand, but he didn't receive it. "Oi, shrimp, give me the book." Naruto actually remained motionless, only turning the page while maintaining a fixed gaze. No one paid any attention to Kyuubi because he was furious, so he grabbed the book from Naruto. Kyuubi took his book and threw it to another bully, who looked at it and threw it to another, while Naruto watched helplessly. Naruto said softly, "My book, give me back my book." He simply wanted to sit and read. Why had they bothered him? Another bully, Tsutomu, held the book up in front of Naruto, just out of reach, and said, "Oh look, it talks." They were taken aback by how quickly Naruto's hand reached out to seize the book, but he was unable to do so. Tsutomu held the book as high as he could over Naruto's head, well beyond his normal jumping range, but Naruto wasn't acting like himself today. "Jump, shrimp, if you want the book." Wondering what had happened, he leapt over the boy's head and grabbed the book as he passed. After landing on the other side, he ran up to his bed. After pulling out the book and taking a look at it, Naruto began reading again, this time focusing on the Yondaime, who was now turning into his hero, rather than the bullies. A few hours after falling asleep, Naruto found himself standing in front of the cage once more. He bowed to the Kyuubi as he stood. He was shocked to hear the great fox laugh and said, "Thank you, because of you I'm alive, I didn't think I was going to be." The tone of his voice indicated that he was both very serious and slightly amused. "Don't thank me yet. That man was just a drunk, a nobody, he wasn't even a shinobi. But you've now awakened to the power inside you, and things will change. And I will not have a weakling as my container, so you're going to learn, and get stronger." "Thank you, Kyuubi Sensei, but how will you teach me?" Despite his admiration for the great beast, he was terrified of him because of his strength, confidence, and power. "You will become the greatest shinobi in the world. I will teach you how to control your chakra and teach you with my memories. I will also give you skills that I had at the height of my power." Kyuubi's voice was unmistakably confident in his ability to carry out his words. He had never had anything to look forward to before, and now that he was being told he was going to become a shinobi, his eyes were wide and hopeful. "Even as good as the Yondaime?" he asked. For the first time in a long time, hope ignited a fire inside of him. He was so happy that he smiled and almost started crying. He grinned, saying, "Better than the Yondaime. He learned from humans and had human power. You're learning from me and you've got my power. It will take a long time, your body can't even handle a fraction of my power, but in time you will be able to hold and control it." He was going to enjoy this. Naruto was going to become great, and when everything was ready, he would let Naruto loose to get the revenge that he had not been able to get because of his blind rage at the time, but he would. With excitement, Naruto asked, "When do I start?" Naruto's sleeping form grinned as he learned, "Now, you're too young for a technique yet, so we'll just work on gathering your chakra in your body and focusing it into your hands." Even more changes occurred the following day. When Naruto arrived at breakfast, he discovered that everyone was avoiding him. Rumors were apparently circulating about him. The fact that he was feared by the populace wounded him, however, he dismissed it, saying that all that mattered to him was that he now had a friend and a sensei. He did, however, receive one final piece of advice from Kyuubi, which was to never reveal what he was doing or the skills he had acquired unless absolutely required. Naruto had to concede that the best trick is the one they don't expect. When the head of the orphanage called Naruto to his office, he was taken aback. He entered the office with some hesitation. That office had never produced anything positive. He peered around the corner and opened the door. The head of the orphanage, Mr. Chikyu, had a folder on his desk and was behind it. He pushed the file off the desk and into the trash can, saying, "Uzumaki Naruto, you have been nothing but trouble since you got here from the beginning, and now, thankfully, I can get rid of you. It seems that someone is willing to put you up in an apartment. I have no idea who it is and I say they are wrong in their judgment. I would toss you out on the street, but it seems I can't get everything. But there will be someone to show you a way today at noon. You are dismissed." Even though Naruto was aware that he had never caused any trouble, he was always held responsible for whatever bad things seemed to occur in his immediate vicinity. However, he was now being expelled from the only home he had. He had been the odd man out and had never been accepted. Now he would have his own place, but he wasn't sure yet. He remained motionless before the desk. Shikyu gave him a furious glance. Then Naruto left, walking out and sitting on one of the benches outside the orphanage. "Get out of my office, boy, you're not my problem anymore." He took the book from inside his jacket, opened it, and began to read. The boy was so engrossed in his book that no one bothered him as the hours went by. A mother once grabbed a child who was about to ask him what he was reading and rushed her away, her pale lavender eyes watching the boy over her mother's shoulder as she was hurried away. Had he looked, he would have seen that no one had come within a few feet of him. Naruto, however, was unaware of this. At noon, he was interrupted by a voice. When he looked up, he saw a woman wearing a head protector, signifying that she was one of Leaf's shinobi. He nodded and tucked the book into his jacket, saying, I asked, "Are you Uzumaki Naruto?" She offered him a key, and after a brief moment of hesitation, he reached out and took it from her. I've been hired to escort you to an apartment and present you with this key. He started to leave through the crowd, depressed by her words, but he got up and followed her, nearly running to keep up with her quick pace. Okay, let's get this over with, I've got things to do, she muttered, like staying away from demon freaks. When they arrived at the apartment complex, the female nin indicated its location. Without turning around, she said, There you go kid, second floor, I'm leaving now. After surveying the building and using one hand to feel the comforting weight of the book inside his jacket, Naruto entered and proceeded to the second floor. He searched the area for a clue that one of the rooms should have been his. He located it. He pulled down an envelope that had his name on it and was attached to a door, waiting to open it once he was inside. The apartment's interior wasn't too bad, all of the furniture was used but in good shape. He cautiously scanned the area in case there was an ambush, but nobody was there. He opened the envelope and took a seat on the couch against one wall. To Naruto, I apologize for not being able to congratulate you on discovering your shinobi skills, but I have other things to do. Let this apartment serve as a gift of congratulations. The rent has already been paid, so you don't need to worry about it. You will receive a letter once a week with enough money to cover your expenses, including food. The kitchen has already been stocked with food, and you can start by getting some clothes of your own by using the money in the drawer of your dresser. You have already been accepted into the Ninja Academy for the upcoming semester, which begins in 2 weeks. I hope you visit, gain knowledge, and develop into the best version of yourself. Don't disappoint me. Your companion Naruto sobbed while sitting there. 2 individuals now had faith in him. Even though one of them was a demon that no one could know about and the other was a stranger to Naruto, he still smiled as he held the evidence of this person in his hands and glanced around the apartment. For the first time, things were getting better in his life. For the first time, he got up and entered his own room. When he opened the dresser drawer, he found a large roll of bills. With a cheer, Naruto grabbed the money he had run out of and ran down, making sure to lock the door before he did so. He glanced back at the building and his location before he ran down toward the shopping area. Naruto had no idea where to begin because he had never gone shopping for his own clothes. He entered a store and began searching for something appealing before the proprietor noticed him and told him to leave because he was frightening away his customers. This occurred a few more times, once for simply staring out the window. Naruto was experiencing severe depression. Why was he treated this way by the populace? What had he done to them before? He located a bench outside a building with brown paper covering the windows and took a seat, feeling terrible as he looked down at his feet. A man who had just left the building where the bench was located said, "What's wrong, kid? Get lost? Can't find your parents?" In his hands was a sign that appeared to be brand new. Wonderland Clothing. New styles for a new you, the man said, glancing at Naruto. Naruto simply nodded naively and noticed that there was a beam of wood with a set of hooks positioned precisely for the sign's loops so that it could hang on it. "How about this? You help me hang up this sign and I'll see if I can help you out, all right?" he asked. As the man held the sign up, he assisted him by climbing up on the beam using a ladder and attaching the loops to the hooks. The man wiped his hands and extended one to Naruto, saying, "Thanks a lot, kid. Now my store can open up tomorrow and I can start business. I'm Kibo. But anyway, how can I help you out?" Naruto gazed at the ground and said, "I was shopping for clothes but they just keep kicking me out of the stores." He opened the door and led the boy inside, saying, "Kicking you out, huh? Well, how about this?" He grinned and turned on the lights, revealing the store that Naruto had previously been unable to see due to the paper in the windows. "I won't kick you out, and because you helped me out and you're my first customer, I'll even give you a discount." Clothing was available in a wide range of sizes and styles. "I used to travel a lot, went around to all the big nations and countries and everything, learned about the different styles of clothing at each. I just got back and I decided to set up shop. I used to live here and I know what people want, so I'll probably do a good amount of business." He turned to face the stunned Naruto. "So, tell me, what are you looking for?" Naruto gazed down at the bright orange that no one had wanted, his old, used clothes, and himself. The sign read, "New styles for a new you." He remembered it and grinned as he glanced at Kibo, who was observing the boy calmly. "A new me." Kibo laughed and smiled broadly at that. "I was hoping you'd say that. Come on, let's have some fun." And so they did. Naruto was initially bashful, but the store owner wouldn't tolerate it and insisted that Naruto always wear a smile. They spent the next few hours choosing clothes together, laughing and joking. It seemed to Naruto that he didn't want this day to end. He had the best day of his life, but regrettably it had to happen. After choosing a number of outfits, including blue jeans, shirts, and other everyday clothing, Naruto was most pleased with his jacket. The majority of it was light orange, with darker areas on his shoulders and in the front pockets. A dark red fox decal depicting a fox's head emerging from a fire was placed on the back. The jacket's added features, specifically its triple-layer construction, an outer waterproof layer, a middle layer of thin, finely woven steel mesh, and an inner layer for comfort and flexibility, made it heavier than most. Additionally, there were multiple hidden pockets on the inside, as well as ones on the sleeves and by the main zipper. Since the pants and jacket were made in the same manner, Naruto received them. There are multiple hidden pockets and 3 layers. They weighed significantly more than regular clothing, but Kibo claimed that it would be beneficial training and help him gain strength. He also claimed that he could repair or modify them if he ever wanted to. After paying for the clothes, Naruto was thrilled to discover that he had roughly half of the money he had been given left over. Kibo had insisted that he discard the old clothes, so he was wearing the new jacket and pants and making his way to the door with the bags when the man called to him. "Hey, you never told me your name." After a brief moment of looking down, Naruto reached up and felt the book he had put in the inside pocket. Recalling the phrase, "Never be ashamed of yourself," he shook himself slightly. He half expected the man to scream at him, demand that he return all the clothes, and tell him to never return, but instead he said, "It's Naruto, Uzumaki Naruto." "Naruto, huh? Well, it was a pleasure doing business with you, and I look forward to seeing you around." After his hectic day with the boy, he returned to tidying up the store. That's Naruto, then, he reflected. He doesn't appear to be very bad. Interesting through. He grinned as he saw the boy leave the store and enter the nighttime street while holding a bag of clothing. He swept up the store, anticipating a busy day tomorrow, and sure enough, it was. "I wonder if I'll see him again." We spent the next 2 weeks getting ready to attend the Ninja Academy. At Kyuubi's insistence, Naruto trained his body during the day by performing calisthenics to increase his strength, and at night he trained his mind and chakra manipulation. In order to run when no one would wake him up, Naruto got an alarm clock and set it to go off early. Kyuubi made some changes after the first week of just running, requiring Naruto to learn how to gather chakra while running. Despite not having even seen the academy yet, Naruto complained a lot about all the training he was doing. After learning that, Kyuubi demanded that Naruto locate the building so he could see its appearance and learn how to get there. It was finally time for Naruto to leave for the academy after 2 weeks had passed. However, Kyuubi demanded that Naruto run his usual distance and then run to the academy, collecting chakra along the way. Naruto usually meditated and Kyuubi would tell him the exercises he wanted to do, which allowed him to regain some chakra and stamina so he could do them, but it appeared he would not have the luxury today. Naruto was exhausted from the extra run. Naruto was quite exhausted when he arrived at the building, and the clock indicated that he was already several minutes late. He asked the woman behind the desk where his class was, and after receiving a frustrated response, he fled down the hallway and skidded into the classroom where the teacher was conducting role-playing. The teacher asked, "Who are you?" He had a small ponytail up on top of his head, a slightly worn headband, and a scar that ran across the middle of his face, covering his nose and under his eyes. As the students started to murmur, the man scowled and said, "Ua Uzumaki Naruto, sir." He turned back to Naruto after marking something on his list. After saying, "You're 5 minutes late, a shinobi must always be on time and prepared. Go take a seat." He went on to conduct the roles. He looked around the room at all the children nodding, and he saw that Naruto had sat back in the corner with his head down on the desk, watching, but clearly exhausted, probably from the run to class, he assumed. "I am Umuno Iruka, you will call me Iruka. Sensei. You will raise your hand if you have a question or comment and wait till I have called on you before answering, am I understood?" he asked. "I will teach you what it means to be a shinobi, a ninja of Leaf. I will teach you many things, including the history of Leaf, rules of being a ninja, weapons basics, chakra manipulation and more." So it started. Iruka was a strict teacher who constantly demanded more from his students, especially Naruto, and pointed out faults in everything Naruto did. But Naruto wasn't deterred by that. Frequently, he would fall asleep in class while actually meditating and using Kyuubi. Naruto followed his sensei's advice and pretended to be a non talented ninja at school while training even harder at home because Kyuubi wanted him to appear that way. He was referred to as dead last at school and teased by his peers for dozing off during class, receiving a reprimand from Iruka, and generally being a poor student. Although Naruto was learning the various hand seals required for utilizing ninjutsu and genjutsu, he was aware that it wasn't true because his strength was constantly increasing and the jacket and pants no longer felt heavy to him. Additionally, he discovered that if he focused, he could speak with Kyuubi at any time. As time went on, it got easier until he was able to talk to Kyuubi while he was running in the morning. Naruto continued to be the quiet boy he had been all this time, but now he had a tiny smile on his lips that annoyed Iruka when he saw it in class because it indicated that Naruto was completely unfocused. Other than when he had to, Naruto never really spoke to the other students and never formed friendships with any of them. For a month, then 2, Naruto kept doing this without revealing his true skill. Since nobody knew anything about him other than that no one liked him, some of the other students thought he was strange and made the decision to follow him one day to see where he went. However, he chose to run instead of go home, and when no one arrived to collect him, the other students thought he had spotted them and chased after him. However, Naruto ignored them and continued to run until the students were finally too tired to continue following him. And they came to a halt, breathing heavily and panting as they saw him disappear. Kiba was upset. The dead last ran so long and so quickly, but how? Akamaru tried to follow by sniffing along the ground, but he wasn't very good at it yet. The smell of chakra, which all Inuzuka dogs learned, overwhelmed him, causing him to sneeze and rub his nose into the ground. He then went to Kiba to sit next to the weary boy and tell him what he could. Despite her refusal to acknowledge it, Ino complained that she found the new child adorable. Upon inquiring about her parents' knowledge of the Uzumaki family, they exchanged glances and advised her to concentrate solely on her studies. Both of them wondered about this odd boy as they turned around and went home. Ino proceeded to inform her friends Shikamaru and Choji that she was only able to learn that he was a very fast runner. When Naruto saw that they were no longer chasing after him, he grinned. Since Kyuubi had promised to teach him a real technique today rather than just more control or strength building, he had actually been running faster than usual. However, the Kyuubi's voice was amused at how eager his container was to learn something new. Calm down boy or you'll exhaust yourself before you can even learn what I'm going to teach you. Go out into the forest, find a good-sized clearing. Naruto followed instructions. So Kyuubi could hear him, he thought, okay, Kyuubi. Sensei, I found a clearing. Alright, you've learned the Bunshin no Jutsu, clone technique, in class, and I like the way you mess it up, no one would suspect that you've already perfected it. Well, I'm going to teach you the next level. This technique is called the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, shadow clone technique, and it will allow you to make real clones, not those flimsy illusions. This way you'll be able to have a sparking partner and improve your fighting abilities, which are quite frankly pathetic. At this, Naruto hung his head, but the prospect of recovery made him smile. Naruto spent the next few hours practicing, first just the hand seal order, then observing how the chakra molding differed from the standard Bunshin no Jutsu, until Kyuubi finally declared he was prepared to give it a try. Naruto succeeded in creating 3 clones that resembled him, but he failed to properly shape the chakra, and they vanished in a cloud of smoke a short while later. There were at least 5 of Naruto running around congratulating each other on getting it right after he finally got it right just as the sun was going down. There would be no classes tonight, so Naruto could get a full night's sleep. Kyuubi grinned inwardly, pleased with his student's development, and sent him home for a restful night. With a joyful grin on his face, Naruto returned home, worn out from training and burdened by his clothes. Alright kid. A few rules first about any of the techniques that I teach you. 1. You don't use them unless you have to. 2. Don't tell anyone where you learned them from should you be forced to show them. 3. Never teach them to anyone outside of your own family. Now before you go back to your place and sleep, go to that Kibo guy, the one you got this suit from. It's time for you to increase the weight. Naruto returned to Wonderland clothing and entered after doing so. This time, Kibo was nowhere to be seen, and a woman was behind the counter. Naruto approached the countertop. Dealing with the brazen demon teacher had made him less shy, but he was still a little afraid to approach the unidentified woman. The woman said, "Hello, can I help you?" as Naruto approached her. "I'm looking for Kibo. Is he in?" "My husband?" Naruto was a little taken aback by this and turned to see the ring on her finger. "He is, but he's a little busy right now, working on something for a customer. Would you like me to take him a message?" "Yuha, could you tell him that his first customer is back?" The woman smiled broadly, something Naruto had never seen done to him in a polite way. She first appeared perplexed, then thoughtful. She then entered what Naruto assumed to be a workroom through a door at the back. "Oh. You must be Naruto. Kibo keeps wondering if you'll show up again. I'm sure he'll be happy to see you. I'm Kido. You wait right here." Naruto was looking at some shuriken holders that were on display in a glass case when Kibo emerged a short while later. After a moment of worry, Naruto shook his head and said, "Ah, Naruto, my wife said that it was you. What can I do for you? No problems, I hope. Well then, what can I help you with?" Kibo observed the boy for a moment and saw a determination in his eyes that had previously been absent. "I need training weights to get stronger." He began to nod, a slow smile spreading across his face. He glanced at the clock on the wall behind the counter and said, "Yes, I think I can do that. Come in back with me." After looking at her husband and then at Naruto, Kido got the idea to lock the door, turn the sign to closed, and lower the blinds on the windows before heading into the back and beginning to make the tea. "Kido, close up, we're done for tonight, and then, some tea, tonight's a working night." Naruto was led by Kibo into the rear chamber. There was a gleam in his eye as he showed Naruto the back room, which was stocked with tools and cloth, leather and metal, charts and dressing dummies. "My wife and I live on the second floor, back here is where I work on my projects." Naruto assumed Kibo had been working on a suit that covered one of the tables, but Kibo simply picked it all up and moved it, leaving the table uncovered. "Now my boy, tell me again what you really need." Naruto started to say, "Training weights," but paused to consider it. What was he actually in need of? Yes, to gain speed and strength, but what else? To become the greatest shinobi, so people will respect me. Good answer. Next, Kibo took a head protector out of a drawer and put it on, which featured the leaf symbol. Looking at the head protector, Naruto nodded foolishly and asked, "I'm guessing that you're in the academy?" Naruto's eyes widened in surprise at his words. "Well, forget them. Go to school and pass your classes, whatever, but it doesn't matter." Kyuubi growled at him, amused as he observed what was happening in Naruto's eyes. "Calm down, kid, trust him. This is the first human I've seen that is sensible." When Kibo saw Naruto's response, he raised his hands. He watched Naruto calm down a bit and grinned, saying, "Relax, kid, trust me when I say that you will use the techniques they teach, but there are a lot better things you can learn." Naruto shook his head, saying, "Good, now that we have that out of the way we can get down to serious business. Now, I notice you don't have any of the usual equipment, no kunai or shuriken, no weapons at all, no scrolls or even an equipment pouch." He utilized the practice kunai and shuriken at school and learned some things from the academy's scrolls, but he never used the majority of them. At this moment, Kido entered carrying a tray with 3 cups and a teapot on it. She proceeded to the table and placed the cups down, filling them with green tea. Naruto took a seat on one of the stools around the table after Kibo took a seat across from his wife. As she handed Naruto one of the teacups, she mentioned, "Kibo used to be a teacher at the academy." Sitting quietly, Naruto accepted the teacup and took a sip. His gaze returned to the head protector and Kibo. That was 15 years ago, before I left to travel. I learned a lot, and I suggest you try it some time as well, but when you're older and ready. Now, business has been quite brisk, a lot more than I had expected. And I could use an assistant. You're probably wondering how this will help you." Naruto gave a nod. He showed by taking a piece of blue fabric from a trash can and holding it up with his other hand's pointer finger as he laid the cloth down on the table. A small glow gathered around his finger, creating a point of light, which he then applied to the fabric and pulled across the surface, neatly cutting the piece in half and even burning the edges to prevent fraying. "Well, here it goes. I'm going to teach you how to mold chakra into your fingers individually, and I use the skill for cutting cloth." Kyuubi sounded impressed as he said, "That is very high-level control, a very good skill to learn. I will also teach you how to wrap it around kunai and needles. I use it so it will do less damage to the fabric that I'm working with. You will learn about colors and dyes, how they blend and change. This will help you learn how to hide and blend into the background. I will show you how to make and repair your own equipment and clothing, something every shinobi should know how to do." Kibo was sipping tea when his wife spoke. Kibo rolled his eyes at that, but his wife ignored him. "My husband and I agree that what is taught at the academy is not what should be taught, but he is happy to use his skills just for the store. I am more open-minded. I will teach you how to use those skills in battle after the store closes. I will show you a taijutsu fighting style that will show you how to properly use the skills that he will teach you. I will also be teaching you how to make kunai and shuriken specifically for you, best fit to your hand, and how to mold chakra into them in ways that your opponent won't expect." Naruto felt overpowered. He had anticipated entering, purchasing some weights, and perhaps having a brief conversation. However, the opportunity to have 2 more teachers was now presented to him. He was at a loss for what to do. For him, it felt like too much. Take it, kid. This is an excellent offer. One will teach you better control than I have been so far and teach you practical skills like how to take care of your stuff, something I never had to do. And the other will teach you how to make weapons, take care of them and use them, something I never needed in a taijutsu style, something I couldn't teach you because I've never been human. This will allow me to work with you and teach you more jutsu and build your stamina. Kyuubi was thrilled. This was the perfect deal. Naruto nodded as he dutifully sipped his tea, which was actually pretty good. Drink your tea. Think about it. I realize this must be a lot to take in. Naruto only needed to hear the words. With the training you'll get, we can promise that you'll get the respect that you deserve. Setting down his cup, Naruto declared, I'll do it. When do I show up? Kido smiled at him and said, come by tomorrow after school and we'll have everything set up for you. Oh yay, before you go. Kibo approached Naruto, quickly performed a few hand seals, and then reached out to touch Naruto's jacket and then his pants leg. Naruto felt his jacket and pants grow heavier a moment later, to the point where he struggled to stand. You said you wanted weights. Well, there you go. Now go on home and get a good night's rest. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. As he waved a weighted arm at them and walked ponderously back to his apartment, Naruto wondered what he had gotten himself into. Despite this, he couldn't help but smile because he had 2 more teachers and was improving. One day, he would be fantastic. Thus, it continued for 2 arduous years. Naruto messed up in school, doing just enough to get by and avoid getting into too much trouble for being late. Maintaining his reputation as the dead last, Naruto found school to be increasingly dull as he learned more and enjoyed his free time more. When he learned a new technique from Kyuubi, such as Danten, Jishin Handu no Jutsu, Earth type, Earthquake kick technique, a lot of chakra was concentrated in his foot. When he brought it down on the ground, it sent out a shockwave that, if directed correctly, could knock down trees. If he wanted it to, it could send out a shockwave in everything. For example, Kaden, Kitsune Fukuman Bakushin, Fire type, Fox Mask Dash technique, is a fire technique that, as long as Naruto could exhale and maintain the technique, would make a fox head appear on the end of a rope of fire that would rapidly pursue any visible target. Naruto acquired quick and effective techniques for focusing chakra into his hands from Kibo. As Naruto recovered, he would help Kibo make clothes by forming the chakra into a blade that he could hold in his hand. As they worked, Kibo insisted on talking, so Naruto told him about the day's events while Kibo told him about anything interesting that occurred in the store. Naruto's focus improved as a result. Naruto was impressed by Kibo's ability to cut the steel mesh he used to add weight and protection to the clothes he sold to shinobi, who were his main clientele, with just one finger. Naruto gained knowledge of the various stitching techniques and how each article of apparel was put together. Once he was proficient at focusing the chakra around a single finger, Kibo began teaching him how to do the same with a needle, which would cause less strain on the fabric than simply pushing the needle through. He even learned how to emboss leather to make it easier to fold and use while also creating patterns. 6 months later, Naruto embossed a stylized fox head on his first kunai holster. Kibo gave him permission to keep it as a thank you and declared that he was now prepared to work alone in the back room. Since it was what Kyuubi referred to as nap time and the Great Fox slept there primarily to teach Naruto about history or tactics pertaining to various terrains, enemies, and a plethora of other topics besides new techniques, Naruto accepted and relished the quiet time in the back room. However, Kyuubi slept while Naruto worked with Kido or in the back room. Kido was a strict taskmaster who pushed Naruto to reach ever higher endurance, strength, and speed targets. She was patient, though, and repeatedly assisted Naruto in refining his stance and movement patterns. In contrast to the flam he had learned at the academy, Naruto learned how to use weapons correctly. She showed Naruto how to operate the little forge she kept in her backyard when she felt he was ready. In addition to creating molds to fit his hands and learning how to melt and pour metal to create his own weapon sets, he also learned how to work the metal and fix damaged kunai and shuriken. In order to strengthen himself, he also learned how to make blades and fold metal. Kido expected him to master all 5 of the taijutsu styles before creating his own form, despite Naruto's expectation that there would only be one. There was the earth style, which involved punching and kicking hard, focusing chakra into the body to harden it and protect it from other attacks, and into a fist or foot to increase the force of the impact. The fire style employed feints and diversions to divert attention from the actual attack. He used the same concentrated chakra he used for the cloth to make burning punches and kicks, concentrating it in a unique way to create images that confused the opponent. Using flowing movements and chakra to catch the opponent's attack and make it impossible for them to escape his grasp was the main characteristic of the water style. Another flowing style, but one that moves much more quickly, the wind style, was used to breach an opponent's defenses and use slashing attacks with hands that focused chakra into the fingers to burn the target. The final style, lightning style, is a combination of speed and agility. It uses the middle finger and pointer to make piercing attacks, and chakra forms around each to form a point that immobilizes the opponent by focusing on particular joints and pressure points. He learned all of her stances and movements, but he could never defeat her in combat. Furthermore, each week at the beginning, either Kibo or Kito would approach him, creating hand seals and adding weight to Naruto's jacket and pants. Naruto never stopped training until 2 years after school started, when he turned 12 and celebrated his first birthday with Kibo and Kito. It was also time for his class's first Genin exam, which was a very emotional occasion for Naruto. Naruto was taken aback by how much time had gone by. It seemed like a blur to him, but it was clear that he had changed. He was smiling more now and ignoring the cold stares and glares instead of allowing them to affect him. He was no longer the shy, repressed boy he had been. Only when he was with Kibo and Kito, laughing, joking, and pulling some practical jokes at which he exhalated did he ever completely come out of his shell. He also discovered that he had seemingly limitless energy, which allowed him to work or train in the back room for extended periods of time without taking breaks. Additionally, Naruto started to always have a sketch pad with him, where he would doodle any new fashion trends or pattern ideas that occurred to him. Every week, the three of them would get together with his sketches and discuss them. They would then choose 1 or 2 items to try out, and if they were successful, Naruto would produce more and keep a portion of the sales. One aspect of Naruto, however, remained constant throughout those 2 years. The book he had received that fateful night, which he carried with him constantly in a jacket pocket for protection. When his name was called for the test, Naruto was deep in contemplation about forearm protectors and whether it was possible to improve mobility without compromising the defense they offered. Before Naruto answered, the child next to him had to kick his leg under the table and he had to be called twice more. Huh? Naruto asked, looking up in confusion. Another teacher, Mizuki, shook his head and rolled his eyes. Iruka scowled. The students snickered, and Naruto blushed in shame. I said that it's your turn, Naruto, unless you don't think you can pass the test. As the students whispered and gestured behind him, he stood up and walked to the front of the class. When he realized he had no idea what to do, Naruto moved in front of the desk behind which Iruka and Mizuki were seated. Yuha. Naruto, feeling ashamed once more, scratches the back of his head. Iruka rubbed his forehead as the students behind him began to laugh. What do I have to do again? You have to make 2 clones using the Bunshin no Jutsu, and then use a Henge no Jutsu transformation technique to look like either me or Iruka. Mizuki clarified. You get 3 chances at each. Naruto grinned and said, oh, okay. Since this would be the last day of class, he decided to enjoy himself. He called out the word as he leapt up and flipped over in midair. Henge. Naruto landed with a similar appearance to Iruka, save that he was holding a sign that read, Kick me, from behind. The students all started laughing, with the exception of a black-haired boy who merely scowled at the foolish antics of the dead last student. With his back to the 2 teachers so they could see the sign, Naruto turned to face the other students and asked, Huh? What? Did I do something wrong? He then changed back and smiled as the other students continued to laugh. Iruka, however, wasn't giggling. He scowled at Mizuki, who was grinning without really trying. Iruka got up, angry at being made the target of the joke, and said, Naruto, the exercise was for you to make a copy of me exactly. As Iruka sipped some water, Naruto noticed Mizuki look at him from behind before he nearly choked on the liquid. So you don't have a kick me sign on your back? Confusion mounting, Iruka turned to face Mizuki as the class erupted in laughter once more. Iruka's eyes widened in confusion and rage as he felt the paper behind his back and tore it off, balling it up angrily and throwing it away without even reading it. He was no longer able to claim that Naruto had not executed the henge properly. A few of the more intelligent pupils were closely observing Naruto. As dead last, Naruto shouldn't have been able to do the combination of feats he just performed. Few people noticed what he was doing because it was so quick and covert. Mizuki hadn't noticed it since he was observing one of the female teachers pass by the open door, and Iruka hadn't since he believed Naruto was too low to pull such a stunt. However, a number of the more intelligent pupils pointed out that Naruto was concealing something, specifically his actual level of skill. Because he was accustomed to requiring the additional chakra to create Kage Bunshin to spar against, Naruto proceeded to execute the Bunshin no Jutsu, inadvertently creating 4 clones rather than just 2. After giving each other a slightly perplexed look, the 4 clones grinned and began to sing a barbershop quartet song that Kibo enjoyed listening to while working. Stepping forward, the real Naruto turned to face the teachers. As the song came to an end and the clones vanished in a cloud of smoke as each section came to a halt, Iruka became enraged and glared at them, asking, "So, Uma, do I pass?" Mizuki picked up one of the head protectors from the desk and handed it to Naruto, saying, "Yes, Naruto, you passed. You must have spent all night practicing those." Naruto took the head protector and tied it on, lying, "Yep, took me forever to get it right." Then, feeling ecstatic as some of the students congratulated him on his prank, he turned and walked back to the seat. When Naruto sat down in his chair, he became aware that something was amiss. His notebook was gone, and it took him a moment to realize what it was. Looking around and beneath the desk, Naruto asked, "Hey, my notebook. Where is it?" When Naruto was unable to locate it, he became concerned. Then he ran to the 2 boys who were staring down at a notebook that looked exactly like his. As he attempted to seize it, Naruto yelled, "Hey! Give it back!" One of the children who was examining the notebook, Monban, snatched it away from Naruto so that he could read it. He laughed and tossed the notebook to another person, asking, "Double layers of silk used more often than single? What is this? Been reading women's clothing magazines?" After about 17 weight increases, Naruto jumped after the notebook, grabbed it, and stuffed it into his jacket. Because of the weight he was wearing, he handed the notebook hard on the ground. The room shook a little, and everyone was startled to feel the wood floor crack. At the interruption, Iruka angrily said, "Naruto, return to your seat." There were 2 cracked indentations where Naruto had landed when he returned to his chair. With a hint of sarcasm, Kyuubi said to Naruto, "Congratulations, kid. You got your head protector. Gave away that you're not dead last to anyone who even thought about what you did. Gave away that you're wearing weights, and a weakness, that stupid notebook of yours." Despite being aware that Kyuubi was correct, Naruto remained irate. He remained silent and reclusive for the remainder of the day, not even answering when a classmate came up to him and asked how he had managed to attach the sign to Iruka. Naruto left in silence after they were dismissed. The parents of the other pupils, who had come to pick them up, congratulated them. His depression was only exacerbated by the joyful sobs of his parents and kids. He was completely unaware that a girl was trying to follow him but was stopped by her father, who shook his head, and they both watched in silence as the boy left. One pair of pale lavender eyes watched him, sad to see the boy who had been so joyful just moments before change into the melancholy one who was now walking by himself. His daughter was asked by Hyuga Haishi, "Does he always leave alone?" "Ya yes father," Hyuga Hinata stammered. When she looked up at her father, she noticed that he had used his eyes to track the boys retreating back and activated the Byakugan bloodline limit. As it deactivated, Haishi gave a small nod. He looked down at his daughter, who was staring up at him in confusion, and he gave her one of his infrequent smiles. He is stronger than people give him credit for. He will make quite a name for himself in the future. He turned and left, making his way back to the estate. "Watch him, you'll see. Now Hinata, I think some of your friends are having a party to celebrate. I will send someone from the branch house to pick you up in a few hours." As Hinata's friends beckoned her to join them, she turned to face Naruto but noticed he had already vanished from view. Wondering what her father had meant, she then went to join her friends. Because he was so preoccupied with his book that he nearly forgot he had arrived at the store, Naruto moved toward it with his feet moving automatically. Wondering why the lights were off, he pushed open the door and entered. Kibo and Kido jumped out from behind the counter as the lights abruptly turned on. They chanted, "Congratulations," together. Kibo approached and gave him a back thud. The man was grinning at him as he gave him another thump on the back and said, "Always knew you would do it, now you're a true shinobi. And you've got the forehead protector to prove it." Naruto was unable to contain his smile. He blushed when Kido kissed his cheeks after grabbing him and bringing him into a tight hug. "We're so proud of you. This is a big step for you, and you've got to be ready for what is to come in the future." "Buddha, I thought you said that the academy was stupid, that it wasn't important." Naruto felt both pleased and perplexed by their congratulations, as he couldn't understand why they were doing so. Naruto was led into the back room, where cake and drinks were indeed waiting for him. "Silly kid, we're congratulating you for getting out of the school and starting your life as a shinobi. Come on, we've got cake and drinks in the back." "Congratulations Naruto," was written on the banner that hung above the cake, and Naruto began to cry. Kibo and Kido gave him a hug without saying anything because they both understood how difficult Naruto's life had been compared to most Leaf residents. The cruelties of the people in the village they called home had broken this boy, who had such a good heart and so much potential. After a few minutes of being held, his sobbing gradually subsided until he was only holding the two of them near to him. "Thank you." He released them and took a step back. "For caring about me," he said, wiping the tears from his cheek with his jacket sleeve. "I shouldn't be crying, I'm sorry." Kido approached him and touched his cheek, causing her to look up at her. "When you're happy, it's okay to cry." Naruto grinned at them. With a kind tone, Kibo ushered Naruto to the table and said, "Come on. Let's eat before the flies get to it." As they sat down to eat, Naruto wiped away his tears and smiled once more. He told them he had passed the exam, and they all laughed, though Kyuubi moaned in the back of his mind. With a drink in one hand, Kibo leaned back in a chair and said, "Well, tomorrow you'll get assigned a Genin instructor, and they'll give you your final test." Naruto said, "Final test," while eating a piece of cake. With a, "Yes, Naruto, final test," Kido replied. "Your instructor will test you and your team to see if you are ready to actually become Genin. The test varies from Junin to Junin, so I can't give you any tips on how to pass. But just remember this. You were put into teams for a reason. You won't be just one person, but a team." Kibo reached over to give Naruto a back pat and said, "And you'll have us, our training, and other things we've taught you. And one more thing," Kibo said, taking a firm hold on Naruto's shoulder and meeting his eyes as the boy listened carefully. He reached over and patted the book in Naruto's jacket pocket, saying, "Never give up and you can overcome any challenge." For as long as he lived, Naruto would never forget those words. The Yondaime said that. Kido reached under the main work table and took out a number of items, saying, "Now, before you go Naruto, we have some things to give you." When he opened a long metal box that showed the 5 elements coming together at a central point, represented by the yin, yang, 5 scrolls containing the symbols of the 5 elements he and she had studied were exposed. A set of thread and needles with their own scroll. Then came a necklace, a pendant of a fox, with a small brass body, tails made of a red opalescent substance that seemed to glow on its own, and a white tip at each end. The red ruby eyes were staring out, burning with inner fire. When Kido began talking again, Naruto was barely able to take his eyes off the necklace. Her hands were resting on the metal case as she said, "Now Naruto, this is very important. The scrolls in this case are my clan's legacy." Kibo approached her from behind and wrapped his arms around her, saying, "I am the last of my clan, and because of a disease that whipped out all the others, I cannot bear children." She reached up to wipe away a tear and said, "Naruto, you have become a member of our family in the brief time we have known each other. The son we could never have. Now before you say anything, we both talked it over long and hard last night. We feel that you are the best person to trust with these. Inside each of the scrolls are the final parts of the training that we didn't get to in the final attack for each. Because of the special chakra flowing techniques I taught you, they can't be copied, you would have to teach how to do it." She breathed deeply and saw Naruto into his eyes. "If you accept, you must promise to never teach any of these to anyone who is not part of your family." For a minute, Naruto gazed at her, his mouth agape. He considered the meaning of the scrolls and what she had said. After considering the trust she was putting in him, he focused on the one statement she made that stood out above the rest. "You have become part of our family, or the son we could never have." At that point, he made up his mind. He gave her a nod while keeping his mouth shut. "I give you my word." He closed the box, and Kido grinned at him. He said, "Give me your hands." She put her hands on top of his and his hands on top of the box. The words, "Bando Tensou no Jutsu," lock transfer technique, caused a spark to fly from her hands to his. Naruto then felt the spark absorb some of his chakra and leapt to the box, which briefly glowed red. The pattern was different when they raised their hands. It now showed a 9-tailed fox, with 5 of its tails extending to form a pentagram, each of which represented a different element, and the other 4 tails circling a central yin, yang, while the fox stood guard over it. His initial reaction upon seeing the fox depiction was to back off, thinking he had done something incorrectly. He then glanced up at Kido, who was studying the box with a faint smile on her lips. "Don't be afraid, boy, it's all right, we already knew, and by the look of it so do you, but I won't ask how you found out." Kibo replied as he looked at Naruto. "I knew you were the container for the Kyuubi when you told me your name that first day. So does everyone else, though they are forbidden to tell it to the younger generation. That's why they looked at you so coldly, they think of you as the demon and blame you for what happened 11 years ago." Naruto stumbled. "Thina, why?" Why treat me like this, like he a son? Because, Naruto. Kido said as he approached him and touched his cheek. She gave him another hug, drawing him close to her. You aren't the demon. You are a boy with a great responsibility. Most people can't see that, but we did. And don't you ever forget it. You are Uzumaki Naruto, not the demon Kyuubi, and we love you as a son. Now that he had a family, Naruto gave her a tight hug in return. Kibo said, now onto my gift, once they had released their embrace. He handed Naruto the scroll and small sewing kit after reaching over to pick them up. The sewing kit is yours to keep, remember a ninja is always self-sufficient. Keep your clothes in good condition and they will last as long as you need them for. Besides, you'd be surprised how much more a woman appreciates a man who can fix the holes in his socks. He winked at Kido and everyone laughed. And that scroll contains nothing as special as the ones my wife gave you. But it does contain a useful genjutsu, the Hada Jitsu no Jutsu. Body camouflage technique. It basically takes a picture of your surroundings and surrounds you with it, so as long as you don't move you appear to vanish. The scroll also has the jutsu for altering weight, the one we used on your jacket and pants for training. Now you'll be able to alter them whenever you want. Taking Naruto's hand, Kido placed the necklace on a silver chain around his neck, locked the latch, and then repeated the jutsu she had used on him in the box. The chain briefly glowed before turning a deep red. And now, for your final gift, Kido said. Only you can remove the necklace or open the box, it will only recognize your chakra. There is a jutsu carved into the back of the pendant, it will absorb any of the extra chakra that you give off, it can hold a fair amount before it stops. To reclaim the power that it has stored, put your hand over it and say the name of your furry friend. She turned to Naruto and then pointed to his abdomen. Huh? Asked Naruto, perplexed. Not too loudly, he protested against being referred to as Naruto's furry friend. My name you fool, Kyuubi. Oh, Naruto exclaimed as his eyes grew wide. Right, I got it. Naruto had not considered this, and it appeared that he was suddenly torn. We figure that with you being a ninja now, you won't be able to work here anymore. Don't worry. We knew this day would come, though not like this. You'll still visit us, right? Naruto smiled and pulled out his notebook, saying, of course I will. Naruto opened to the page where he was working on new forearm protectors, and they all grinned and sat down. I've still got things in here to talk with you about. I was thinking about double-layered leather, with it sewn so that metal slats can be slipped inside for added protection. My problem is that I can't find a way of one-handedly putting them on with them being fully secure. Kido glanced over the pages and grinned, saying, well, let's see what you've got. They talked about the forearm protectors for the remainder of the night. Naruto hugged each of them tightly before leaving the store, even though it was late. Naruto was happier than ever with the metal box beneath his arm, the sewing kit and scroll in his pocket, and the necklace on. At Kyuubi's insistence, Naruto got up early the following day to begin his daily run before sprinting to the academy to meet his team and Genin instructor. Now, Naruto wore the kitsune pendant necklace and the forehead protector, but he concealed the necklace beneath his shirt. By releasing the jutsu on his garments and letting them return to their normal weight, Naruto made excellent time. He was practically a blur as he ran, having lost about 200 pounds. As Naruto skidded to a stop outside the shinobi school, Kyuubi laughed and told him, that's why I said to remove it. We don't know what will happen today or what this final test might be. It's best that you learn the difference between your weighted clothes and not so you can use your body to the best of your abilities. Naruto arrived, but only one person saw him. As the orange figure came to a stop right in front of Haruno Sakura, she nearly let out a scream. She fainted instead of screaming, though. Perplexed as to why the girl had fainted, Naruto watched as she crumpled. He approached her warily. Sakura. He hadn't interacted with the girl much, though he had observed her behavior around Uchiha Sasuke, one of the other boys in the class. He still thought she was cute. She began to awaken, brushing his thoughts aside. Are you all right? You fainted. Idiot, Sakura exclaimed. To Naruto's confusion, he said, you shouldn't run up to a girl like that. I thought you were attacking me. He then apologized. He tried frantically to come up with an excuse for his early and hurried arrival without disclosing any personal information, saying, I'm sorry, I always run to school in the morning, and I got Uma excited. She clearly didn't believe him. Huh, right. Sakura sighed and looked around. She began to walk to the classroom, Naruto following, saying, come on, why are you really here? I always get here first and you usually get here last, but today you almost ran me over to get to class? They entered the empty room, with Iruka's bag behind the desk indicating that he had already arrived and had likely gone out to eat before class began. It's Yuha hard to explain. Sakura looked at her classmate and said, whatever. Today was different. He moved so quickly earlier, and his posture was better and not stooped as though he were burdened. He seemed to be full of unreleased energy because of the spring in his step. Her posture indicated that she was going to receive an answer one way or another, and Naruto sighed. Look, what was with that book yesterday? I heard the bit about double layering of silk, but why would you have a notebook with stuff like that in it? Sakura was already perplexed when Naruto clarified, I live alone, and I needed a way to earn money after the orphanage kicked me out. An orphanage? Expelled? Living by yourself? She listened to his story because she had never heard of any of this and, upon reflection, she knew nothing about him. In order to avoid having to reveal anything about Kibo and Kito, he was trying to come up with a suitable lie. So, I got a job at a clothing store. And I would Doa Uma scouting, for the owners. Sakura gave him a long look before nodding, as if to believe his lie. I would see what people were wearing and taking notes, and they would pay me for keeping Tama ahead of the other stores. As more people arrived, Sakura stepped aside to fawn over the Uchiha as soon as he entered, leaving Naruto alone once more. That was smart of them. No one would suspect someone like you of scouting for a clothing store. He returned to his usual seat in the back, however, as he was accustomed to being by himself. Not really listening to what was happening, Naruto sat and practiced his hand seals for his new attack, Kaden. Ryuza Hain Hitofuki no Jutsu, Fire type. Dragon Wing Gust technique, which allowed him to conjure momentarily controllable fiery dragon wings. He looked up in surprise when his name was called, lost his sense of purpose, and briefly used the jutsu to create a shimmer of heat on either side of him that quickly vanished. Iruka sounded annoyed as Naruto ignored him after he called his name 5 times. Naruto, pay attention when someone's talking to you, she said. He glanced down at his clipboard again and said, I was assigning you to a team. Uzumaki Naruto, Haruno Sakura, and Uchiha Sasuke, you will be Team 7. Sensei, said Sakura. Sakura blushed when she said, as much as I appreciate being on the same team as Sasuke. Naruto's shoulders slumped as he looked down at his desk, deeply hurt by the remark, why'd I have to be on a team with Naruto? Sakura, the teams are put together so as to balance out the members of the team. You, Sakura, are the best in class at the mental aspects, while Sasuke is the highest with physical aspects. Naruto on the other hand is the lowest at both, and it was necessary for you 3 of you to be put on the same team. I am sure that Sasuke and you can make up for any of Naruto's shortcomings. Maybe if he's lucky something of you will rub off on him. I'm sure you two will be fine. Iruka laughed at Naruto and returned to reading the list of names of the teammates. Other squads. The students were instructed to wait in class for their Junin instructors to arrive after all of the various teams had been called. As if they had been waiting to take their teams, a number of the new teachers from the teams entered right away. Less than half of the original class was soon present, but Team 7's instructor was nowhere to be seen. 7 and 8 teams remained after 30 minutes. Akamaru and Kiba were playing ball. Kiba would bounce the ball off the floor or wall and have the dog jump after it. Though no one could see it, Shino was sitting by an open window and watching a spider catch a butterfly in its web. Despite his strong affinity for insects, he knew better than to get involved because even if he did, the spider would starve. Instead, he watched as the spider wrapped the butterfly in silk and learned from it. Compared to Shino, Hinata was acting a bit more clandestinely. Even though she had her back to him, he was watching Naruto with her bloodline activated. Her Byakugan, or white eyes, bloodline limit gave her the ability to see everything in her immediate environment in 360 degrees, see through objects, and follow the flow of her chakras. Now, what she saw was incomprehensible. She pretended to watch Kiba and his dog while Naruto sat at an angle behind her. She couldn't understand why Naruto was referred to as dead last, despite having one of the biggest chakra supplies she had ever seen, especially for a genie level. She was about to continue observing him when the door opened and a woman entered, the leaf forehead protector resting on her forehead. With the exception of Naruto, who appeared unaware, everyone was staring at her when she said, I am Yuhi Kurenai. She looked around the room, a little perplexed, and said, I got the wrong time for picking up my team. I am here for Team 8, you other 3, you're Team 7 correct? Sakura gave a nod. Sakura enjoyed spending time with Sasuke, but she disliked waiting. Do you know where our instructor is? Did something happen to him? She asked. Kurenai shook her head and sighed. She beckoned for her students, saying, I am afraid that your teacher has been known for coming late. There is nothing I can do. Kiba approached the door, laughing. Shino did not respond as he moved in the direction of the door. What are the odds? The team with the dead last gets the dead last teacher. But Hinata paused, glanced at Kurenai, then back at the previous squad. Could they come with us? She asked Kurenai before turning to look at the orange-clad boy at the back of the room, who had not moved or even reacted because the woman had entered the room. Kurenai was aware of the look and briefly glanced up at the boy in the back row as well. Sakura and Sasuke watched Kurenai closely as they awaited her choice. After a moment, she said, "I don't see why not." She went to the blackboard and began writing a note for the late Junin, saying, "I'll leave a note for him. It's his fault for being late anyway." After Sakura and Sasuke had made their way to the door, Naruto shook his head and glanced around, his eyes taking on a distant expression as though he was reflecting. Kurenai was startled by Naruto's eyes as he approached the door after finishing her note and turning to face him. They made her think of ice and bitter cold because they were so cold and blue. As the boy passed her and went out into the hallway with the others, she forced herself not to shiver and followed him. She genuinely felt sorry for him and knew that he had lived a difficult life, but she was afraid of upsetting the other nin, especially those who had lost family to the Kyuubi, if she did. Naruto and Kyuubi were deep in a chess game, which he took very seriously because he detested losing and had yet to defeat that fucking fox. Kyuubi abruptly yelled at him to pay attention, and when he looked up, he saw that the other people were heading outside and down the hall. He followed them without realizing that the girl with the pale eyes was watching him closely. Kurenai gave a brief explanation of their responsibilities as Genin as they were walking. Babysitting, weeding gardens, walking dogs, picking up things, and making deliveries are basically the lowest of the low jobs. They would advance to the next level and then be given more difficult jobs that matched their skills. However, they were confined to the minor details for the time being. Only two of them remained silent. Shino, who rarely speaks, and Naruto, who was engrossed in his game. They arrived at Area 8 for training. They were stopped in a clearing by Kurenai. Kurenai said, glancing at each member of her team, "Okay, I need to get an idea of each of your abilities so I'll know your strengths and weaknesses and see where you need the most help. Now, you pick the method by which you will show me." This was her test. She gave them an objective, impressed her, and offered them a range of approaches to try, such as a survival test, asking her to test them by setting up an obstacle course, or having them battle her. However, in her opinion, those were incorrect responses. The strategy would be to spar with one another so that she would be aware of the team's strengths and weaknesses. Team 8 members exchanged glances as they considered how to best impress her. Akamaru barked in agreement as Kiba said loudly, "A fight, of course, it's the best way. We should each fight Kurenai Sensei so she can know how good we are." Hinata bit her lip and pressed her fingers together as she looked down at Kurenai, clearly not wanting to fight her. Shino had a contemplative expression. No, Shino said it for the first time in front of her, and although it wasn't particularly loud, it had an immediate impact. It would not be fair for us to fight against her, and she should not be the only one to know our weaknesses. Kurenai was taken aback because Shino had done it correctly the first time, while Kiba had made the typical error of being overconfident in his abilities when confronting someone who was far more skilled than he was. Hinata stammered, What should we do then?" But she appeared relieved that they wouldn't have to fight their teacher. Hinata paused between finger taps and glanced at Shino, saying, "We should fight each other." She didn't like the idea, but he was right, it was probably the best course of action, so she nodded in agreement. It was Kiba's turn to surprise her, and he was correct, it wouldn't be fair. "Hold on, we don't have enough people, we would need to fight one-on-one for that, but we don't have enough time for two to fight and then rest while the other is still fresh." The last piece appeared, and Kurenai grinned. "We should still do it, rotating, so we can see how we fight when at our strongest and weakened." Shino would make a good leader, calm and sensible. At this moment, a man on the Kahona side of the field leapt down from a tree. Everyone looked at it, with the exception of Naruto, who was getting frustrated and losing his chess game. The man wore a jacket and black pants, with a worn dot-out Junin vest over the jacket. Additionally, his forehead protector was angled down over his left eye, completely covering it, and a mask covered the lower portion of his face. In the mostly dark clothes, his silver hair was a striking feature. As though embarrassed, he scratched the back of his head and said, "Hitaki Kakashi, instructor of Team 7. The other Junin stalked over to him, and he was unable to maintain the lie under her glare. "Sorry I'm late, this little boy asked me to help with his homework." She was now only a few feet away from Kakashi and said, "Kakashi, today you were supposed to pick up your students. You're over an hour late now." Kakashi turned to face his team and asked, "I'm here now, okay?" He turned and went to another area, saying, "Team 7, follow me, we're going to our own training area." After Sakura glanced at Sasuke, The two of them pursued Kakashi. Naruto then looked up from his treetop seat and trailed behind them. Kurenai observed Kakashi leaving. She whispered to no one, "I hope you know what you are getting yourself into, Kakashi." She turned back to her students and said aloud, "And you better treat him well, or you'll have more than you can handle." Alright. First, Shino against Kiba, and then Hinata against the winner while the loser rests. The three followed Kakashi to another training area. He led them to a clearing where 3 wooden stumps stood side by side. Kakashi leaps to the center stump and takes a seat in front of his youthful charges. He gestured to Sasuke and said, "All right, introduce yourselves. First you." He said solemnly, "I am Uchiha Sasuke. I don't like many things at all. My dreams are reviving my clan and to kill a certain man." Sakura fixed Sasuke with her gaze. It was the most amazing thing he could have said, in her opinion. Kakashi sighed and appeared to have anticipated that response. On the other hand, Naruto was grinning broadly and utterly unaware of the angst around him because he had successfully defeated the Demon Fox's queen by using a fork attack on Kyuubi. This time, Kakashi turned to Sakura and said, "I see, well then, how about you?" Sakura blushed as her eyes strayed to Sasuke, who gave her no attention at all. "Me, okay, well there is someone I like." As she turned back to face Sasuke, her blush deepened. "My dreams area," she yelled, "and as for things I hate, well, rivals. Damn you, Ino pig." And then there was silence. Kakashi let out a sigh. Dealing with a lovesick girl going through puberty was the last thing he wanted to do. The outburst had diverted Naruto, who was now frowning. He had just lost because he had misplaced a piece, and Kyuubi's laughter had not helped either. Kakashi said, "And lastly, you," pointing to Naruto. "Huh?" Naruto stopped and replayed the previous few minutes in his head, going over what he had said. Sakura stared at him and said, "Oh right. I am Uzumaki Naruto. I like my teachers." Everyone knew that Iruka had always been cruel to him, so how could he like his teachers? Hold on, plural, teachers? Was he being taught by someone else? Kakashi had noticed that, too. "I don't like mean people. And as for my dreams, I really want to become the greatest shinobi ever, greater than the Yondaime, so everyone will respect me." The dead last would never surpass the 4th Hokage, Sasuke nearly chuckled. Looking at Naruto, Sakura pondered what it was about this boy that inspired him to strive for greatness despite the fact that everyone seemed to despise him. Beneath his mask, Kakashi grinned. This boy was intriguing, and he could already see that he had a lot of potential, perhaps even beginning to use it. He vanished in a cloud of smoke after saying, "Okay, it's late now, come on over here to 7 sharp tomorrow and we'll see if you're ready to truly become Genin. And don't eat a breakfast, you'll regret it." Sakura asked the other 2 members of her team, what did he mean by that? If we're ready to really become Genin, I thought we were already Genin. Sakura was shocked that Naruto was the one to say, "He's going to test us. Yesterday we were just tested to see if we had the skills to be a Genin. Tomorrow we're going to be tested to be actual Genin. I intend to be ready." He began to leave. "And I suggest that you do eat something tomorrow. We all need to be at our best." Sakura nearly missed Sasuke's departure as she watched Naruto leave. She didn't, though, and she turned to confront Sasuke, asking him a lot of questions. This time, though, she wasn't just asking about him or her, she also wanted to know about Naruto. Even though she was asking about the dead last in front of him, Sasuke seemed to find this more annoying than her mere conversation. Naruto was the worst, he was the best. In his mind, strength was the only thing that was important. Naruto didn't go straight home. Instead, he practiced the element-style stances by walking to his own training area. With his eyes closed, he slowly performed each movement, sensing how each muscle moved as he extended for an attack or pulled in for a block. He increased his attacks gradually and discovered that, without his weights, he was reaching new heights. He even needed to readjust himself to avoid surpassing his control capabilities. He gradually increased his speed until he could perform the moves perfectly at roughly half of his maximum speed. It was some time after the sun had set that Naruto completed his training. Ecstatic at his newly discovered strength and speed, he headed home. In order to make the most of his jutsu, Naruto devised a strategy that involved changing the weights. He decided to keep adding weight, just like Kito and Kibo, and only take it off when he had to engage in combat. Unless he really had to get rid of everything, it would only be cut in half even then. Naruto grabbed some instant ramen for supper when he got home. Kito's nutrition lectures taught him how to eat better, so he didn't have it very often, but tonight he felt he deserved it. He took a seat with the steaming bowl on the couch. Naruto only ever asked out loud, am I really ready? When he was by himself. Kyuubi was doing the equivalent of curling up to sleep when he said, yes. You are strong enough, you have enough techniques, and you have the speed as well. You need to work on strategy, but for that you've got me. You'll be fine. The great nine-tailed demon fox fell asleep, dreaming of the great nine-tailed demon vixen, after saying, no teaching tonight. Just dream and relax, you'll need to be at your best tomorrow. I will not allow my container to fail the exam. Naruto did have some strange dreams when he went to sleep. Naruto skipped his usual run the following day and arrived early at the Team 7 training area. He was prepared to remove some of his clothing if necessary, but he had set it to full weight. Naruto felt fully energized after a satisfying breakfast. To keep himself busy until the time came, he had even packed a few items. Naruto took a heavy waxed string, a thick needle, and a piece of leather out of the bag. Naruto heated the leather and made it easier to work with by bringing a small amount to the palm of his hand and running it along both sides using the chakra training he had received from Kibo. He wanted to make some strong bracers for his forearms today. As soon as the piece he was working on was finished, he wrapped the leather around his forearm and tied it in place with some of the string after rolling up the sleeve of his jacket. After tying and setting it correctly, he marked with a pencil where you would need to cut it to the right length and width, untied the leather, and put it down. In order to preserve chakra, he used a kunai to cut the leather so that it extended from just after his wrist to nearly his elbow. When Sakura and Sasuke arrived, Naruto was halfway through his work. They expected to find Kakashi already there because they had arrived just in time, but he was not. Rather, they observed Naruto working beneath a tree. Curious to find out what he was doing and whether he knew where their instructor was, they both approached him. Two shadows fall across Naruto's lap as he works to add a layer of softer, thinner leather to the inside of the bracers to make them more comfortable. When he looked up, Sakura was right behind Sasuke. The inflection on the R in "Hey, where's our teacher?" made it obvious that he thought it was just for him. Naruto scowled as he surveyed the training space. Naruto shrugged and asked, "Not here." Naruto didn't want any trouble at this early stage, so he said, "Could you please move a little, you're in my light?" All he wanted was to peacefully finish the bracers. Sasuke was upset. How dare they speak to him in such a manner, dead last? Before turning and leaving, he scowled down at Naruto, who had returned to affixing the inner layer. Since he would follow the teacher's instructions to pass and get stronger, he hadn't eaten today. After glancing at Naruto, wondering what he was doing, Sakura turned to follow Sasuke as he left. Seeing the reasoning behind Naruto's remarks, she had eaten a little, but she felt bad for following Kakashi's advice and didn't eat much. Naruto kept working, affixing the two pieces of leather with tiny burns of chakra. After finishing, he reshaped the bracers to fit his arms. After they were the right size, he took out a few buckles from his bag, ones he had received from Kibo earlier in the year but had never been able to use. When Kakashi arrived, he had already attached them and was in the process of making holes in the straps. Sakura's irate yell served as his warning. "You're late." Sakura was upset and hungry, and after Naruto dismissed him, Sasuke had refused to speak to her. Under Sakura's glare, Kakashi trailed off. "I'm sorry, there was a little old lady." "Liar," yelled Sakura. With a sigh, Naruto returned to completing the bracers. He still had a small task left. Kakashi glanced around and noticed that Sasuke was upset about being late too, but he remained silent. He caught a glimpse of Naruto working on the bracers beneath the tree. How had he mastered their creation? A book? Perhaps, but Naruto was doing it on his own now, without any help from others. He would investigate that later. Kakashi approached the central log and placed an alarm clock on top of it. He struck it and faced his pupils. He held up two silver bells on strings and said, "You three have until noon to get these two bells from me." He glanced at Sakura, who was already making plans, and then at Naruto, who appeared to be totally unaware, before saying, "If you can get the bells from me, you pass." "Ready?" Sasuke had tensed up, ready to go. With a sigh, he turned to face the two students who were prepared. "Go." The three of them vanished after that. As he fastened one of the buckles, Naruto grinned to himself. There are just 3 left. He sent a clone to observe while he completed the bracers, but the others were unaware of this. Kakashi pondered whether Naruto had actually heard anything he had said, but he was unable to ponder for long because a number of shurikens shot out at him straight from behind a bush. Dodging them, he reached into his bag and removed one item. Sakura looked on in disbelief as Kakashi took out a book and began to read. What was Naruto doing, anyway? He continued to fasten another buckle beneath the tree. She looked when she saw a flash of orange, but nothing was there. She turned back to see Kakashi giggling to himself as he turned the page after catching a kunai on his finger. It would be a strange day. In contrast, Sasuke was observing Kakashi and laying traps. He leapt out and hurled multiple kunai at the teacher when he was ready. Kakashi easily avoided them, but one of the kunai threw a bunch of kunai and shuriken at the ninja after cutting a wire. Kakashi also avoided those, only to discover too late that he had been manipulated so that the projectiles he had just avoided were speeding directly toward Naruto. Sasuke's attack diverted his attention just as he was about to dash to their aid. The clone leapt to the ground and grabbed the shuriken and kunai. Each projectile was hurled back at the combative pair using the water style's fluid movements. With a smile, Naruto fastened the final buckle before pulling his sleeves up and donning them. Kakashi was grinning. The Uchiha were attacking this good boy, making it impossible for him to even read his book. He thought the blonde was okay because he hadn't heard the sounds of Sasuke's last attack hurting Naruto. He was taken aback when the same kunai and shuriken that he had just avoided suddenly attacked him once more. To avoid the incoming fire, he and Sasuke leapt apart. How? He could not make out any strings. Now he saw Naruto rolling his sleeves down and standing up. Did he do this? He nearly missed Sakura hurrying in to try to grab one of the bells because he was so preoccupied. Sakura had spotted a gap. On his own, Kakashi was struggling with Sasuke, and when the attack from what she could only refer to as the other Naruto returned, he had created a gap. She hurried, but she couldn't keep up with the boys and was totally caught off guard when Kakashi leapt into a tree. Naruto believed that this was the right moment to join the fight. Using the fundamental technique they taught at the academy, he charged in and launched an attack after releasing the clone that vanished in a cloud of smoke. He had mostly concentrated on the other styles, so he wasn't very good at it. Naruto attempted to sneak in and steal the bells while Sasuke diverted his attention with his attacks. Naruto had not impressed Kakashi with his performance thus far. His form was poor, and his attacks were careless. However, what had previously occurred? This is what caught him completely off guard when Sasuke performed hand seals. Kakashi realized what was happening and leapt out of the way of the great fireball, only to discover Naruto standing in front of him in an unfamiliar stance. Lightning style, Naruto grinned as he launched an attack, employing two kunai rather than storing chakra in his fingers. He was reluctant to reveal everything. He launched his attack much more swiftly than before, and this time, his movements weren't hurried. However, Naruto was attacking directly and using the kunai to target particular points rather than aiming for the bells. Surprised by the abrupt change, Kakashi dodged and blocked his attacks, nearly missing Sasuke's direct attack when he joined in. However, they were still slow for him, and he was able to avoid or block each of the two boys' attacks. The final member of Team 7 attacked when the two boys spun kicks in the direction of Kakashi's head. Sakura noticed the gap that had been made when she watched Kakashi lift his hands to block the spinning kicks. She dashed forward at full speed and threw a kunai. Both of the bell's strings were severed when the kunai struck true. As they fell, Sakura leapt forward to seize them. Just as Kakashi's foot rose and caught the bells in midair, the alarm went off. Unable to grasp the bells that were now between his toes, Sakura slid directly beneath his foot. When the alarm sounded, Sasuke and Naruto both leapt away from Kakashi, only to be led down to discover Sakura sprawled out in the dirt while Kakashi still had the bells. As he picked himself up, Naruto questioned, "We failed, didn't we?" Sakura stood up, in a bad mood. She believed she had let Sasuke down. She would have given him one if she had gotten the bells so they could both pass and remain together. In contrast, Sasuke was furious. He was the number one in their class, so he couldn't fail. He believed that Naruto was solely to blame and that if the blonde hadn't interrupted, he could have obtained the bells on his own. Instead of passing as he ought to have, he would have been sent back with the dead last, which was unacceptable. Sasuke began to run through hand seals once more, but Naruto stopped him. Naruto turned to Kakashi and said, "Don't, you'll just waste chakra. Give us another chance. We'll collaborate this time rather than work alone." Sakura picked herself up and said, "But then only two of us will pass, and not the other." Wrong. Kakashi shook his head, saying, "The exercise was designed to help you all work together as a team. You couldn't have gotten the bells from me otherwise. Did you not notice that you, Sakura, had an opening when Sasuke and Naruto attacked together? Divide the two food packets that are over by the bridge among the three of you." He vanished in a cloud of smoke, leaving the three of them alone. "You have half an hour, and then you had better come after me with everything you have to get the bells away from me." When the students arrived at the bridge, they saw that two food packets were waiting for them, and they each glanced at the others. wondering how they would split them up. Naruto turned and walked back to the stumps, considering his options. You two have them, I already ate this morning, a little more time won't cost me anything. Remove the weights, he won't anticipate that. Distract yourself with the other two. With kunai and shuriken, have the girl attack from a distance. He should be attacked by the other boy using his taijutsu. From inside Naruto's mind, Kyuubi said, that should leave enough of an opening for you to get in and steal the bells. Naruto grinned as he completed the required hand seals and tapped his jacket and then his pants, keeping his back to Sakura and Sasuke so they couldn't see what he was doing. He then took off his jacket, folded it up, and placed it under a tree, leaving him wearing a white t-shirt. His necklace was now visible, but he didn't really care as long as they didn't know what it did. He glanced at his forearm bracer and decided that, while the other two were hungrily eating the food packets, he placed his own pattern on the blank leather. He took off the first one as he sat down and placed it against his leg. Gathering chakra into his finger, he started to work, embossing the leather. Sakura watched Naruto while she ate, thinking that this couldn't be the dead last who had been in her class for the previous 2 years. She had seen him fight, and once he had switched to that new style, he was on par with Sasuke. He was also intelligent, though she hadn't really heard him talk much before, and he had always been quiet in class. What had happened to him to make him this way? She decided to try to figure out Uzumaki Naruto as soon as she could. As he ate the food, Sasuke was silently fuming and glaring at Naruto. He didn't like Naruto before, and he didn't like him now. Was he preventing him from trying to get the bells when the Junin's guard was down? This wasn't the dead last that he remembered. What had changed? And what was he doing now? It seemed like he was just running his finger over those bracers, but there was heat rising off. That didn't make sense. Why would he be burning something he had just made? Sasuke dismissed it, saying that getting the bells was more important than Naruto. Unfortunately, it seemed that he would need the girl's help, and yes, even the dead last. As they finished their meal, they approached Naruto, who was reattaching the bracers, and upon returning, they noticed that Naruto had embossed them. It was a simple outline of a fox's head, one on each bracer, mirroring the other. Sakura had to admit that they looked pretty cool, and she looked at Sasuke, wondering if he could accomplish such a thing. Sasuke, however, paid no attention to the bracers. Sakura stated, clearly ahead. On attack won't work, so we do need a plan. One person should go for the bells, and 2 people should divert his attention. Sasuke and Naruto both nodded in agreement, saying, if we hadn't been working together, it would have worked the last time. Look, we're both good, but our styles conflict, and we were getting in each other's way, Naruto said, drawing questions from his teammates. We shouldn't have 2 people facing him in taijutsu, either, he said. Sakura scowled. One person should attack from close quarters, another from a distance, and the final one should go for the bells. Which part will be taken by whom? Her speed wasn't enough to get the bells, but she wasn't as skilled at fighting as Naruto or Sasuke either. Naruto grinned. And Sakura has better aim than me with kunai and shuriken, so she should take distance. This was also untrue, as he had frequently made the kunai strike the practice log at the academy backwards, to practice disarming an opponent from a distance without actually hurting them. However, it mattered that his 2 teammates thought it was true. So that means that I'm going in to get the kunai, and without my jacket I'll be a lot faster. What is the connection between your speed and your jacket? With a slightly annoyed tone, Sasuke inquired. All right, you're curious? I have a weighted jacket. They glanced at his jacket under a tree and then back at Naruto. Sakura had to acknowledge that, even though she believed Sasuke was always in the best shape and no one could match him, she could tell he was in pretty good shape without his jacket. Naruto glanced at them both and said, does that sound good? Sakura nodded, all for it, and Sasuke scowled but nodded once. Good, then let's get into position. He was getting impatient, so they broke up and all went in search of Kakashi. Sakura went up into the trees. Sasuke got as close as he dared while remaining hidden. Naruto found some cover to watch from, and Kakashi, who was leaning against a tree reading his book and blushing too, was laughing a little. The 3 of them split up, taking positions that would best support the plan. Sasuke initiated the attack by charging in alone, hurling kunai until he was close enough to use taijutsu. Sakura then proceeded to throw numerous shuriken in arched pathways in Kakashi's direction, and the 2 of them were able to guide him out onto a path through the woods. Naruto assumed a runner's starting stance a short distance along the path, and when Kakashi was within range, he pushed off the ground with all of his strength, racing towards Kakashi and the bells. This was going to be interesting, for sure, because Kakashi already knew what they were doing, a complicated team move from novices, and was taken aback when Naruto seemed to appear out of nowhere and raced toward him. He had never seen a Genin move so quickly, and he couldn't possibly be in control of himself while running that fast. Kakashi prepared himself for another double attack from the two boys, but it didn't come, and the Naruto went right by him. What? A distraction. Kakashi shifted, felt the slight weight of the two bells on his belt loop, but Sasuke and Sakura had halted their attack, and he heard the alarm going off in the distance. Kakashi sighed. Looks like you all failed to get the bells, as if they lacked the necessary skills to cooperate. Then he heard two dingles behind him, and when he reached down to his belt loop, he discovered two acorns instead of the bells, attached with a different string. He turned to see Naruto sitting on a log, smiling at the teacher, holding up both bells, and said, "Or you could have them already." He removed the two acorns from his belt, unintentionally tearing off one end of the belt loop. "It looks like I'll have to fix these when I get home." He turned to face the Genin, who were observing him in turn, while Naruto grinned broadly while balancing the bells in one hand. "You are officially Team 7, Kakashi said, smiling at them and turning to face the Genin who were watching him in turn. "Alright, you three pass. Show up here tomorrow for your first mission," he said, with Naruto smiling broadly and juggling the bells in one hand. "I'm excited for what will undoubtedly be an exciting journey with you three." He glanced at each of them individually before saying, "Goodbye." He vanished in a cloud of smoke. Without saying a word, Sasuke turned and left the field. Naruto yawned to himself and stretched his arms. Sakura glanced at him and then at Sasuke. She was torn between wanting to follow her crush and wondering what Naruto would do. "Yeah. You two want to go get something to eat?" Sakura and Sasuke turned to Naruto, who had replaced his jacket. They were a team, so why don't they get to know one another over dinner? He said with a joyful smile. Then Sasuke sneered, "Pa, I have better things to do than waste time with something like that," and he turned to go home. Sakura turned away and ran after Sasuke, who ignored her, saying, "Yuha," with an apologetic glance at Naruto. "Maybe some other time." Naruto muttered to himself, "I thought we were supposed to be a team." Kyuubi said in his mind, "That boy, there's something up with him, not sure what yet. You three have a way to go before you become an actual team. Perhaps it's related to that person to kill, or something. In any case, go get a bite to eat and put the weight back on. It will have to wait until tonight, but I'm getting something ready for you." Kyuubi. "Sensei, what are you?" So that only the demon could hear him, Naruto pondered. Kyuubi chuckled and moved away from contact, working on whatever it was. "You'll see, kid, just go get something to eat." After completing the required seals and tapping his jacket and pants to instantly increase their weight once more, Naruto left for town, wondering what the great spirit within him had in store for him this evening. When Naruto discovered a small shop that appeared to be about to close permanently, he entered under the name Ichiraku Ramen, and discovered his own little, dilapidated paradise. Naruto spent the next hour contentedly trying out the various ramen dishes that they had to offer. Fortunately, he had been saving money and could pay for everything in the end. With the money he paid them, the old man and his daughter could continue to operate for a few more days, and they would, if he promised to return, which he did without hesitation. The old man had been reluctant to sell to Naruto, but after he proved he had the money, he served him his first bowl of ramen, followed by his second, third, and finally his third. As each bowl passed, the man smiled at Naruto and then spoke to him, until they were having a cheerful little conversation between mouthfuls of noodles. Finally, Kyuubi gave Naruto the order that he was ready and it was time to go home, and Naruto paid for the ramen, bowed to the old man and his daughter, who both grinned at him, and then he left the store and went home. He entered his house, locked the door behind him, and then walked into the center of the room and sat down in a meditative position. Naruto closed his eyes and allowed his thoughts to retreat within himself. When he opened them again and looked around, he was pleased to see that his room had changed from being filthy and odorous to being clean and smelling faintly of clothes, like the back room of Wonderland clothing. He moved through the passageways until he reached the cage that contained the great demon spirit within him. The other side of the bars appeared as Kyuubi had requested, a vast, desolate wasteland of dried cracked earth. It had been several months since Naruto discovered that he could alter the appearance of the areas on either side of the cage, if not the cage itself, and as a result, Kyuubi was seen sitting up and watching the gateway for Naruto. When he arrived, the fox got up and moved over, bending down to gaze at Naruto through the gateway. "All right, Sensei, tell me about your plans." Naruto took a seat in the chair he had created in his mind. "That guy with the silver hair, the teacher, he was going easy on you. After all, The man wasn't a Junin for nothing. If it was a real battle, you and those other two would have been dead before you could take 3 steps. Naruto nodded slightly, knowing that he was good after all that training, but that he could only go so far in 2 years. Based on what Kido had told him the last time, he was probably only lower Chunin or upper level Genin, but once he mastered the element styles and the chakra control and techniques that Kyuubi was teaching him, there was no doubt that he could become a Junin in a few more years. So, what will you do now? Naruto ignored his other thoughts as he gazed up at the fox out of curiosity. I'm going to alter your physical appearance, particularly your senses, but there will be some other things too. Kyuubi grinned, recognizing the look of curiosity and a hint of trepidation in Naruto's eyes. Kyuubi said, you may as well know, this is going to sting a bit, and your senses will be wild until you learn to control them. Naruto was aware that his senses were weak compared to the demon in front of him, but he wondered how the fox was going to change him. Additionally, I'll be giving you some of my own senses in addition to your typical human ones. When pain was mentioned, Naruto bit his lip, but he knew that the gifts that would accompany the pain would far outweigh any temporary discomfort. Okay, I'm ready, he said, looking up into the fox's red and gold eyes. Good, the spirit nodded. Form a cup or bowl on your side, and follow my directions without question. Kyuubi closed his eyes and focused. As he held out his hands and formed a good-sized bowl in his hands, wondering what it was for, Naruto felt the distinct sensation of seals being made and chakra being channeled. It was then that Kyuubi's eyes opened wide, glowing red, focused on Naruto and the bowl that had been formed. Naruto was not prepared for what happened next. Kyuubi spat directly into the bowl, precisely filling it to the rim. The liquid bubbled and swirled of its own accord, not clear, but deep red and glowing, reminding him of flowing lava. Drink it right now. I would prefer not to make the same mistake twice. The demon told him to make sure he didn't miss a drop. The bowl was empty when Naruto dropped it from his hands and fell to the ground, clutching at his belly as the fire spread outward and filled his entire body. His eyes clenched shut, his teeth grinding together, and he missed the changes that were happening to him. Naruto hesitated only a moment before bringing the bowl to his lips and drinking the blood, feeling it burning down his throat, setting his insides on fire, but he couldn't stop, not with those great glowing eyes still directed at him. The fox was amused to see that Naruto's ears almost returned to normal, but they remained just a little pointed at the tops. As the last of the features vanished, Naruto slumped, breathing heavily, and the pain subsided, leaving him as he was before, almost as he was before. Kyuubi watched with interest as Naruto's hair turned red for a brief moment, and red fur sprouted down over his face and the rest of his body. His features were the same red and gold that looked down at him, and when his eyes opened for a moment, claws formed on his hands as the fur reached it. Most surprisingly, however, a red tail lashed out from between his pants and jacket, and the fur on his face receded as well. A bit stingy. Naruto yelled at the fox as soon as he got his voice back. He glared up at the great beast with his, once again, sky-blue eyes. I thought I was on fire. Naruto stopped and sat back, not tinkering with the chair this time, then glanced up at Kyuubi, saying, Yuha, what was that anyway? It wasn't blood, after all. You don't actually have a body here? Kyuubi sat down, his eyes no longer glowing, and said, half right. As I've said before, we are nothing but spirit and energy here. But what did you just drink, and I don't have blood? What it was is a small part of who I am. You would have received it eventually due to the seal. I simply accelerated the procedure a bit. Does that imply that you will vanish? Because you shared a piece of yourself with me? Naruto's face flashed with emotion, but all he received was a yelling laugh. Huh? That tiny bit? No, child, I'll be with you until the end of time. After a moment of reflection, Kyuubi said, come to think of it, because of your body absorbing me, you might actually live that long. You would have to live several hundred years at the rate that I was being absorbed by the seal and put into you. However, that's a long way off. Naruto was taken aback. He had never considered living for hundreds of years and, to be honest, would prefer not to right now. In any case, you no longer only have demon essence when you summon my energy. It now flows through you. This has multiple meanings. 1. There won't be as many negative consequences when you use more of my power. 2. I've been teaching you human techniques, but you'll be able to use more. 3. You will have the ability to activate artifacts and demon seals that you may come across. The human world is home to a number of them. When you're ready, I'll show you where I've hid 1 or 2. Lastly, you will have the ability to change to a certain extent. The more of my essence you take in, the greater that ability will be. Change? Into what? Naruto's voice was a mix of excitement and fear as he asked. A fox demon. No matter what form you're in, you'll always be who you are. You can only change into a furry, looking human with a tail at this time, the fox yawned. We'll discuss that later, but for now, get up and move around your apartment to acclimate to your new senses. I will teach you how to change and make use of your other demon senses while you are asleep. He turned away and walked out over the empty fields, saying, Now go away, I want to take a nap. Naruto closed his eyes and opened them again to find himself lying on his back in his apartment, covered in cold sweat and suffering from a fading headache. Even though it was well after sunset and he had not turned on the lights, Naruto could see perfectly, beyond perfectly. He could read the title of a discarded scroll in a dark corner as if it were in his hands. He could smell the sweat on his body. He could feel every ounce of the weights on his shoulders. He could smell the smallest breeze from the crack under the window. And he could hear a fly buzzing like a swarm of bees. Naruto tried closing his eyes and concentrating on a single scent, which made him think of Kibo. Another scent made him think of Kito. He discovered that he could detect the scent of almost everyone he had encountered in the last few days, including Sakura, Sasuke, and the entire Team 8. It was more difficult to distinguish the teachers, Kurenai, and Kakashi, though. He tried concentrating on other things. He could smell the droplets of ramen on his shirt as if a steaming bowl was in front of him. The taste of all the flavors at once nearly overpowered him. When Naruto tried to stand up and nearly fell, he realized how exhausted he was, so he went to his bed and lay down without bothering to cover himself. The bed creaked with the extra weight, and he gritted his teeth against the sound, but relaxed when it stopped. Naruto closed his eyes and attempted to fall asleep, but the assault on his senses kept him awake for a long time until exhaustion finally took him. While he slept, Kyuubi taught him how to control the intensity of his normal senses and the few demon senses he had been given, some of which were more difficult to get used to. He was able to sense the spirits of other living things, such as trees, grass, animals, and birds, and he could even sense other ninja. This was particularly helpful against ninja because few of them knew how to conceal their spirits the way they could conceal their chakra, which Naruto could sense. Naruto was shocked to learn that he could see auras if he focused chakra into his eyes. Kyuubi wasn't sure if this would work, but he told him to try focusing on an animal to see if he could understand what they were trying to say. Each of the demon senses would drain chakra from him as it was at the time, but as he used them more and became accustomed to them, they would drain less and do more. He would also need to focus less on them to keep them active, and whenever he drew on one of Kyuubi's senses, he would change a little bit of himself until he had learned to control the senses completely, his eyes turning red if he looked for the auras of others, his ears changing to resemble the foxes if he attempted to decipher the animal languages, and his hair turning red if he attempted to sense the spirits. In terms of transformation, Naruto would need to concentrate on completely changing his body, which would cause all of the demon's senses to activate, gradually depleting his chakra, but he would be faster, stronger, and more nimble during the transformation. Kyuubi also cautioned that if he became enraged, he might begin to change without conscious control, so it was best if he controlled his emotions. It was almost morning by the time they finished, and Naruto needed to get up. As time went on, Naruto became bored, Kyuubi became frustrated, and Sasuke became agitated as well. The only people who didn't seem to be affected were Sakura and Kakashi. What was the reason for all of this? 2 words. Yard work. They had accepted the 6th D rank mission, which was to weed Mr. Sono's garden. Naruto hadn't been expecting much, but this was significantly less than what he had anticipated. Their first mission had been to deliver some scrolls throughout the village, which they took very seriously until they discovered that the scrolls were only recipes for cooking. The second had been to walk a large group of dogs around Konoha, which was actually more like the dogs dragging all 3 genin around the village. And the third had been to assist a librarian in rearranging the books. Naruto relished the experience of being back in the library, which had been one of the places he used to hang out before being expelled from the orphanage. So far the worst task had been the 4th, babysitting a set of 5-year-old triplet boys. They were nightmares, each of them. None of the 3 genin could keep up with them, they didn't seem to need words to know what the others were thinking. At first it was little things, like confusing Sakura by switching names and getting upset when Sakura couldn't get them straight. Then they moved on to Sasuke, pushing him to the limits by asking him inane questions without end, such as, why? When they finally moved on to Naruto, he thought he was prepared for them. He was wrong. He should have known that tag was probably not the best idea when they looked at each other and smiled before running away from him while he counted to 20. When he started looking for them, he could have sworn they were ninja by how well they hid themselves. Then one would pop up from behind a desk suddenly and disappear just as quickly when he jumped after. By the end of that mission, Sakura was on the verge of ripping her hair out. Sasuke had a twitch in his left eye and would reach for his kunai holster if he heard the question, "Why?" And Naruto was exhausted and ready to swear that there were 6 of them, instead of 3. Kakashi just chuckled and wished luck to the one that had to teach them when they became ninja. The mere thought caused the others to shudder. The 5th mission, on the other hand, was literally a walk in the park. They had to deliver some tools from a woodworking shop to another, and they passed through one of Konoha's most picturesque parks. It was a lovely day, and they all enjoyed it. Now, they were weeding Mr. Sono's garden, but Kyuubi was sick of Naruto performing such menial tasks, and Naruto was happy to comply. The demon told Naruto, "Gods and demons, kid, you're making slower progress now than you did when you were in the academy," as he pulled up a dandelion and tossed it into the pile. "Next time you go to get a mission, try and get a better one than just one of these stupid weeding jobs again." Naruto nodded and continued working. The day was hot and the 3 genin were perspiring. They couldn't even converse, so they worked in silence, save for the occasional mumbled threat against weeds or complaints about how much longer it would take. The statement made by Kyuubi was not entirely accurate. Naruto and the others were making rapid progress, but only in specific areas. Kakashi's primary focus was teamwork. When they had no mission, he would take them to their training grounds and assign them a task, such as removing the bells from him or keeping him away from the bells. Naruto continued to work hard with the demon on various techniques, and he dedicated time each night to practicing the stances for the element styles. However, it was also true that Kyuubi was not progressing as fast as he had previously on the skills he had focused on. Naruto continued to add weight to his jacket, increasing it by 1 step every week until the total weight was approximately 300 pounds, which required him to use chakra to prevent him from displaying how much weight he was carrying around. This constant use of chakra tired him but strengthened him. When the 3 met at the bridge, Naruto brought it up. "I am so tired of these stupid missions," Naruto said, lying down beneath the tree, and the other 2 joined him. Sasuke did this more to avoid the sun than anything else. He still didn't show it as much as he used to, but it was nice to be out of the sun. Sakura sat down near Sasuke, even though she would have sat with him anyhow. "What can we do, though?" Sakura, who was the most resigned of the 3 to the small, time missions, said, "We're just genin." Although she didn't express it, her inner voice begged to leave the pointless missions. Sasuke simply snorted. He detested the missions. Training was the only way to gain strength, and these short-lived tasks were not helping him. "I say that today, when we see the Hokage, we demand a better mission." Naruto glanced at the other 2 to see how they responded. Sasuke briefly became excited at the idea of a higher rank mission. Sakura appeared conflicted. She knew she wasn't strong and that her fighting abilities were far inferior to those of her teammates, but she knew he would protect her, so if he wanted a tougher mission, she would want one. They both nodded and looked at Naruto. "Okay, here's what we do," and the 3 of them leaned in, strategizing how to pursue. With any luck they would get a mission out of Konoha, and then he would be able to get Naruto to practice more with his demon senses, which they had been sorely lacking. The Kyuubi smiled deep inside Naruto. As usual, Kakashi arrived last. He took the 3 genin up to the Hokage's office and noticed that they were acting as if they were planning something. The Hokage was sitting behind his desk as usual when they arrived, and Iruka was with him today, giving out the mission assignments. Naruto rolled his eyes at the other 2 as their next set of duties were read off. "Oh, hurry up." Normally quiet, Naruto felt that he had to be loud in order to get what he wanted in these situations. "All we've been doing is these stupid little things," he complained. "Why are we unable to obtain something larger? We're prepared." Kakashi simply moaned to himself. He knew he was going to get in trouble for this. The other 2 genin nodded in agreement. "You idiot!" Iruka screamed at Naruto, who was not happy with the outburst, particularly when it was his turn to work with the Hokage. "You're just genin, and even with Sakura and Sasuke, you aren't ready to take on even a C-class mission." Naruto was extremely offended by that remark, even though he probably didn't mean it this time. "Do you really believe I'm worthless? I am not useless, and I could prove it if you gave me a chance," he said softly, but with an edge that slightly resembled the ring of steel as it slid out of a sheath. Sakura and Sasuke were taken aback by this action, which wasn't part of the plan at all, and they had never heard Naruto speak in such a way before. Kakashi was tense and prepared to intervene if something happened, but the Hokage's small laugh completely destroyed the atmosphere. "All right," he said, laughing beneath his big hat, "you guys concur with him that you believe you're ready?" Sasuke and Sakura each nodded, and Naruto just stared at him. Then you'll get your C-class mission. Protecting Mr. Dazuna while he returns to the Wave Country is your task. You will then keep him safe until the bridge is finished before you go back. Iruok cut in, but sir, they're just Genin. Everyone deserves a chance, Uruka, remember that, the elderly man said, grinning around his pipe. Naruto grinned back at the Hokage, who was giving him a mission outside of Konoha in addition to a better one. Now show in Mr. Dazuna, so they may meet the one they're going to be looking after. Uruka nodded his agreement, finally relinquishing the point as he stood up and proceeded to the door, opening it and letting in a man in his late 50s with a bottle of sake in his hand and a bag on his back. I'm meant to be protected by these shrimps? They look like a bunch of brats to me, especially the short one, he said, his voice barely slurred by the sake he had consumed. The fact that Sakura giggled at his remark about the short one didn't help at all, and Naruto scowled at the man, who he already didn't like. This was going to be a long mission, and he was supposed to spend time protecting him? After Naruto said, many surprises come from the least expected source, the man looked at Naruto with a slow smile on his face and stopped the bottle halfway to his lips. Huh. That was a nice one, kid. I like you. He chuckled and turned to face the Hokage before turning to face Kakashi. Well, I was half expecting you to fly off the handle. What time do we depart? Kakashi turned to the Genin and said, you have 20 minutes to pack for a trip that will last 4 days. Nothing that you don't absolutely need should be taken. Prepare your bags and meet at the East Gate. They all said, yes, sensei, and then they hurried away. After running back to his small apartment, Naruto gathered his belongings and stuffed them into a backpack. He took all of his kunai, shuriken, and senbon needles and placed some in the bag and the remainder in his jacket and pants' hidden pockets. Calm down, child. Here, you won't go to war. This mission is merely a guard one. And you're going to spend it training, Kyuubi said, laughing. Don't worry about the needles. Pack half of your shuriken and kunai. Additionally, your skills with them are inferior to those with the others. Additionally, don't bring any medical equipment. Naruto nodded and followed the demon's advice, packing only as directed. He packed the weapons and a change of clothes in his bag, along with the forearm bracers and, at Kyuubi's request, a bandana and a pair of sunglasses. I'll explain later, kid, when you need them, Naruto said. The others were already at the East Gate when Naruto hurried there with everything packed. I apologize for being late, but my apartment isn't that close to this gate, he said. You're not late, you're actually right on time, Kakashi said, standing apart from Tazuna. Well, time to go. With that, they all began to walk eastward, toward Wave Country's location on the coast. During their walk, Kakashi gave them a brief overview of the other ninja nations, explaining that many of them had hidden villages and weren't dependent on the 5 great shinobi countries. Hidden Grass and Hidden Waterfall are 2 instances of this. At the moment, Wave Country lacks the infrastructure needed to import the items required to establish and maintain a hidden village. So, does Kage exist in these other hidden villages? In other words, is there a Takikage in Waterfall or a Kusakage in Grass? Sakura spoke up, her shyness overriding her curiosity. No, the Kage is the only leader of the 5 great shinobi countries. The villages lack the title of Kage and are instead led by an elder or strong ninja. They would need to be accepted by the other great nations in order to receive the title, and there are certain requirements and details that are too dull to discuss. Naruto was walking ahead of the others, and since it was a bright day, no one thought to ask him why he had put on the sunglasses. He began to focus chakra into his eyes as Kyuubi had instructed, and at first nothing happened, but then things started to change. The trees turned greener, and they seemed to blur, as if the outline was solid, but the colors began to bleed, mixing and interacting with the colors around them. It wasn't just the trees, though. A bird stood out in the tree as a vibrant ruby as it sang, and Naruto had to force himself not to try to understand the song, because if his ears changed, it would be a dead giveaway that he had undergone a change. Overall, he felt contentment from his surroundings and the trees. He looked back at his teacher and teammates. Sakura's aura was pink with a hint of blue that only extended a short distance from her body. It was not as free as the auras of the trees. The pink became more intense as she looked at Sasuke, and the blue nearly vanished. Sakura blushed and turned her head away, and gradually the colors returned to their original state. The different colors represent the different emotions, Kyuubi explained, adding that one can see how strongly and intensely someone feels based on the color and intensity. This is the demon eye's initial level. The girl's blue represents her confidence, and her pink represents her love for the other boy. Her affection for the boy increases as she looks at him, but her confidence virtually vanishes. By the end of this trip, You should be able to work without the colors and have an intuitive understanding of a person's aura. For now, use the colors to identify emotions. Naruto nodded and turned to face his other teammate, Sasuke, who startled him by surrounding him with only very dark colors, of black being the best, blue coming in second, and dark green last, reminiscent of the shifting colors one sees when looking at oil. Black is the most dangerous kind of rage and hatred, uncontrolled and untamed. There's plenty of it in that boy. As I mentioned earlier, blue is confidence, Kyuubi said, sounding a little intrigued but still moving on to the next color. I wonder what could have made him that way. He is very confident in his strength and abilities, as you are aware. Envy is green. This boy is inquisitive. Despite appearing to have it all, he is enraged and envious. The aura of madness is just one more thing that shimmers around him. This boy's mental stability is not the best, so watch out for him in the future if you notice an increase in his aura. What are you observing? Naruto simply grinned and turned around, saying he would check on Kakashi later if he could. Sasuke yelled at Naruto, who had apparently noticed him watching and was not happy. When Naruto noticed the puddle, which was about 20 feet ahead of them and shimmered blue with some of that aura of madness, he kept his demon eyes activated. It also had a new color, a shimmering purple, and upon closer inspection, he realized that it was not just one, but two auras. The purple hue is killing intent. Keep in mind that those are human auras. There is someone laying in ambush and hiding there. You will probably be attacked, so stay alert. The two of them wore metal gauntlets on their arms, one on his left and the other on his right. Strangely, the gauntlets were connected by a long spiked chain. They passed the puddle without incident, and it wasn't until they had passed it that they were attacked. It was so silent that not even Kakashi appeared to notice a figure emerge from the puddle, another on his back. The sound of metal rattling caused Naruto to spin around, grabbing a set of kunai from his holster and preparing them, but it was too late, as Kakashi was completely ensnared in the chains. One down, said the figure holding the gauntlet in his left hand, and then both figures appeared on either side of Naruto after yanking on the chain, which tore through Kakashi's figure. The other said, two down, but that was untrue. Sasuke leapt into the air, threw a shuriken, pinned the chain to a tree, and then stabbed both attackers in the elbow of their gauntlet. Wearing arms with a kunai through the shuriken's hole, preventing the nin from pulling free. As Sasuke descended, Naruto used his chakra to spin around the kunai in his hands, as Kibo had taught him, and stabbed them in the gauntlet. Wearing arm. The point he aimed for was one that Kido had taught him with her lightning style, and he was able to completely immobilize their arms while the chakra cauterized the wounds so they wouldn't bleed to death. The chains broke away from the gauntlets as Sasuke descended, grabbed the gauntlets, one in each hand, and turned, kicking his feet out behind him and kicking the attackers in the face, phasing them for a moment but not enough to stop them, one attacking Naruto and the other rushing at Sakura and Tazuna. Naruto barely had time to raise his arms before the attacker, seemingly oblivious to his incapacity to sense anything below the elbow of his other arm except burning pain, spun a kunai out of the pouch on his leg with his good arm. Naruto felt the sting of his attacker's kunai across the back of his hand before the attack on him ceased and there was a black blur. After landing, Sasuke saw one of the ninja launch himself at Sakura and Tazuna. He quickly moved to put himself between the attacker and his apparent target, the bridge builder, but nothing happened. Then, in a flash of black, Kakashi appeared, with one of the disabled ninja beneath each of his arms. What they had previously believed to be Kakashi was actually a wooden log that had only appeared to be him. Kakashi quickly tied the two attackers to a nearby tree when he appeared. It appears that we are currently dealing with a number of issues. These are missed Chunin, and based on what I observed, Mr. Tazuna was their target. The worst that can be anticipated for a C-class mission at this stage of the mission grade selection process is the occasional bandit. The enemies are only supposed to be other ninja in missions of the A or B class. Sakura begged, Kakashi-sensei, we're not prepared to battle other shinobi. However, we have already agreed to the mission. However, that creates another issue. The kunai that was used against Naruto was probably poisoned, and Naruto was hurt. The others turned to face Naruto and his cut hand. With the others watching, Naruto took off his jacket, took the bandana from his bag, and quickly used it to tie a tourniquet around his upper arm. The cut on his hand was not healing, and he could already feel a burning sensation creeping up his arm. Fortunately, Kido had insisted on teaching him at least a little first aid. What are you doing, Naruto? Sakura asked him, feeling a little queasy at the sight of the blood still dripping from his hand. I will pull out the poison. Gripping his teeth against the pain, he twirled a kunai in his other hand and brought it down, cutting it diagonally across the back of his cut hand. The burning sensation quickly subsided and vanished. I refuse to be the weakness that makes this mission turn back. You did the right things, Naruto, and everything is excellent, but that cut is too deep and too large. Without saying anything, Naruto reached up with his good hand and untied the bandana from his upper arm, then began to tie it around his hand to stop the blood loss. If it isn't treated properly, you could bleed to death, Naruto said, wishing he could hit the man, but he was right, the cut was too deep, and for a normal person, that could have meant a long, slow death of blood loss. Naruto that. Kakashi's voice trailed off as he reached out to stop Naruto, but he paused when he noticed that the cut Naruto had made was already healing and that, judging by the appearance of it, there wouldn't even be a scar. Kakashi looked up to see Naruto staring at him, defying him to speak, and the coldness in those blue eyes caused him to pause for a moment more. That should do it, but I'll have to examine the cut later. Okay. Kakashi-sensei. Naruto forced a tiny smile as he gazed at the Genin before him. He still had some misgivings about him, but perhaps, just perhaps, he could trust this man enough to allow him into his life. Naruto used that time to finish tying the bandana off the back of his hand, even though it was no longer really necessary, and to check his teacher's aura. There was a lot of curiosity and a little trepidation at the top, but there was also a lot of confidence and, like the trees, there was the green calm. He didn't even bother to try to identify the colors. Instead, he just tried to identify the feelings that came from each color. Kakashi started to tick off on fingers as he turned back to face their assailants, who were glaring at him. He grinned at them and said, well, we'd love to stay and all, but we have to be going. A sunny day plus no rain for days equals no puddles. He turned to Tazuna, who was looking quite concerned, and said, now that Naruto has been taken care of, I have some questions for you. Someone should be along to pick you up in a little while. Just take me to my village, please, and I'll tell you everything. Wave Country, my home, is failing, Tazuna begged Kakashi, just please get me home to my daughter and grandson. Its only hope is this bridge. Ever since Gato, the crime lord, established his company, among other things, he is in charge of shipping between the mainland and the Wave Islands. He charges exorbitant fees, but that's not the only issue. He has been dealing in drugs and other items since he first started, and the mercenaries he employs to protect them are frightening away anyone with the means to flee. Naruto looked at his aura and saw that he was telling the truth and that his feelings were genuine. All I ask is that you get me to the site. It's true that I lied. Gato will do anything to see that I die and that the bridge is left unfinished. Please, get me there. Give my people a fighting chance. Naruto said, I don't know about you two, while he washed the kunai he had used to battle the ninja. They all turned to watch him. Sasuke's curiosity was piqued by Naruto's remark, but I say we finish the mission. Besides, it might be interesting to fight some ninja from another village. Naruto knew he had Sakura captivated. Sakura appeared quite concerned about the possibility of competing with other ninja, but she ultimately decided to follow Sasuke to the end of the world. Kakashi said, that's settled, come on, and he turned to go to Wave Country with Tazuna and the three Genin. For the remainder of the trip, everyone remained on increased alert. They assumed Kakashi was more vigilant. When he was reading his book and giggling every few minutes, it was difficult to tell. From the mainland, the group was able to get a boat to Wave Country. They were surrounded by a thick fog. The fog was so thick that they nearly missed the bridge until it loomed over them. Although the bridge was enormous, it was only roughly 3/4 completed. They were dropped off near Tazuna's house on a short pier by the pilot. All of Naruto's senses went into overdrive when they were roughly halfway there. They yelled at him, danger. He turned, snatched Sakura and Tazuna, and dragged them down with him. Everyone down! Shouted Kakashi. He arrived just in time. Above them, a huge blade, resembling a giant cleaver rather than a sword, whirled through the air. It got stuck in a tree near the lake. A man was standing on the blade's long handle by the time they were back on their feet. Watch, but do not interfere, said the Kyuubi's voice in Naruto's heart. Look at his aura. That man is both mad and very confident in his abilities. That means that unless the madness has changed into delusion, he is quite powerful if he thinks he can take on your Genin instructor. So watch, and unless I tell you to, do not interfere. So Naruto observed. After a minute of conversation, Kakashi reached up to show his left eye, which Sasuke dubbed the Sharingan, copy wheel eye, as he got ready for battle. As instructed by Kyuubi, Naruto brought his hands together in the seal and concentrated his chakra. I think that now is a time to activate the second level of the demon eyes. Close your eyes. Focus more chakra through the basic chakra molding seal and then fold it back into your eyes. That should be enough to trigger the second level. When he opened his eyes, he saw Sakura yelling as their assailant, Zabuza, sliced Kakashi in two. Naruto was somewhat taken aback by what he saw. Both the attacking Zabuza and the sliced Kakashi had a faint blue aura. The great demon told the truth, they aren't real, watch. Water splashed against the ground as the Kakashi dissolved into it. Behind the Zabuza, another Kakashi materialized and placed a kunai to his throat. This Kakashi was more substantial, glowing brightly beneath his skin with a multicolored aura. He is real. The second level of the demon eyes allows you to see a person's strength and the skills that they use. It will also let you see the movements of chakra used outside the body. What you saw was a Mizu Bunshin. Water clone. That was why it had a blue aura, it was a water technique. Naruto yelled, "It's a fake, Kakashi." But the real Zabuza was already in the background. All Kakashi could do was dodge the sword's swing, but that wasn't enough. After Zabuza kicked him, he flew through the air and hit the water. Zabuza had Kakashi imprisoned in a Suiru no Jutsu, water prison technique, a moment later. Kakashi shouted for them to leave. It was their responsibility to keep Tazuna safe, not to battle Zabuza. Zabuza wasn't even anticipating their responses. He channeled chakra and a Mizu Bunshin that formed on the water's edge nearest the three Genin using a one-handed seal. The clone was attacking in a flash. Before the kick connected, Naruto had just a moment to lift the seal and raise his arms to block it. The kick threw him backwards despite all of his training and weights. His forehead protector flew off in the process. He landed on Naruto's back. His first instinct was to hurry up. He's really strong. Naruto was unable to think. The red of the demon eyes turned to his natural blue when he unintentionally dropped the chakra flow to his eyes. Kid. Naruto was terrified as the clone stood on his forehead guard and glared at him, saying, "We don't stand a chance." Kid. Naruto staggered back, falling after tripping over a rock. "We've got to run," he exclaimed. The bandana caught his attention as he threw out his hand to break his fall. When he finally heard the voice inside his head, he turned his head away from the man's clone. Kyuubi yelled at him, "Get a hold of yourself," to finally get his attention. That is his killing intent. It's strong enough to impact your base instincts to run. But a human can overcome his instincts. Or are you an animal? Kyuubi said the final word. Shaking off the killing intent, Naruto got to his feet and said, "I don't train animals. Now stand up and face him." Naruto got up and said, "I don't run." He felt ashamed of himself for falling for something so easy. He gestured to the forehead protector and said, "And I want that back." Sakura said, "Naruto, what are you doing?" Fear of the man with the enormous sword filled her voice. After a brief series of seals, Naruto wiped one hand over his jacket and another over his pants and said, "Getting my forehead protector back." One more second, and he was gone. Sakura could only make out a blur of movement at the forehead protector and the clone. The clone kicked his chest in the same way Zabuza would have, but Naruto wasn't present. With one hand gripping the forehead protector and the other using a kunai to cut up the clone's leg, Naruto slid beneath the clone. Even though the cut wasn't lethal, it was sufficient to cause the clone to dissolve because it was unable to maintain its shape when damaged. Rising to his feet, Naruto fastened the forehead shield behind his head. Naruto said, "Here is a name for you to remember," while using one hand to straighten the forehead protector. His hand slipped down and removed the sunglasses, exposing his piercing blue eyes. The person who will become the greatest ninja in the entire world. Uzumaki Naruto. Now, let him go. Sakura observed the boy with the blonde hair. When he hurried at the clone, she was certain he had snapped. However, the clone was reduced to a pool of water after he triumphed. However, it was more than just fighting skills. As he stood there, wearing his forehead protector, Naruto told the man brandishing the long sword that he was going to become the world's best ninja. He had never looked like this to her. So calm and collected, so confident, but most importantly, how courageous he was. She looked at him and her cheeks began to flush a little. Tazuna kept an eye on the boy. When he had first seen the boy, he had not thought much of him. However, he had been poisoned during their initial attack and bravely cut his own hand to release the poison and blood. And now here he was, not even blinking, facing a formidable foe. By association, the boy gave him a smile and a sense of increased bravery. He gave the boy a silent cheer. Although Kakashi was aware of the boy's stubbornness, this was a bit much. Naruto clearly had no idea who he was interacting with. But when he didn't desert him, he had to concede that the boy had earned his respect. From inside the water bubble, Kakashi said, "Naruto, you don't understand. This man is too strong for you, he is Kaleda." But Zabuza interrupted him. "Ah." "So you know about my little nickname," Zabuza said, his voice full of what could only be described as glee. He looked over at the Genin. Naruto stood on the lake's edge, while Sakura and Sasuke continued to watch over Tazuna. Everyone was observing Zabuza. Sakura began to shake in terror, Sasuke's face hardened but remained motionless, and Naruto appeared unconcerned by the realization. "By the time I was your age, my hands had already been bathed in blood. 14 years ago, I killed every member of that year's graduating class in Hidden Mist, and I've been unstoppable ever since. That is why I am called the Demon Zabuza." Sakura's shaking worsened, and the bloody revelation appeared to shake even Sasuke. Tazuna stepped back, terrified and repulsed by the killer. Unable to look at the man who had trapped him, Kakashi stayed silent. The others were startled out of their wild imaginations by Naruto's response. He chuckled. Initially, nobody was certain of the source of the strange noise, but gradually, everyone's attention was drawn to Naruto. Naruto chuckled even more, "A demon?" Then, as swiftly as it had appeared, it ceased, and Naruto's tone turned deadly grave. "You know nothing of demons. Show him, kid. Show him what a mistake he made. Show him a true demon," Kyuubi snapped. Red energy began to emanate from the boy's body as he began to feed him his chakra. Despite his quiet voice, they could all hear Naruto say, "I'll show you a demon." His own yellow chakra blended with the red demon's. The mixture appeared to be a sinister fire raging inside of him. As his presence grew more powerful, everyone could sense the moments slipping by. Zabuza's hand began to shake slightly as he observed the boy with the blue eyes, but only Kakashi noticed. Naruto abruptly vanished in a haze of yellow and red. There was only one kunai left, and it flew hard and swiftly in Zabuza's direction. Just before the note that was attached to the kunai exploded, Zabuza was able to catch it and toss it back into the air. However, it was already too late for him. Two chakra wings formed in the air behind him, arching high and back, and Naruto emerged in front of him, supported by the force of his power on top of the water. As the wings descended, Naruto began. Kaden. Ryuzahain Hidofuki no Jutsu. Fire type. Dragon Wing Gust Technique. Zabuza attempted to flee the assault by removing his arm from the watery orb that imprisoned Kakashi. Even though the direct attack had exploded directly in front of him, he was able to avoid it, but he was not entirely safe. Burning gashes appeared all along his right arm, which was caught in the blast. He let out a painful cry. When the Suiru no Jutsu, water prison technique, was released, Kakashi was able to dive under the water and escape the attack. "You brat," Zabuza growled, creating a seal with one hand. With their swords drawn, 6 Mizu Bunshin, water clones, gathered around Naruto. As the clones attacked, he screamed, "Die!" But Naruto was already creating seals. A dozen Narutos materialized on either side of each Mizu Bunshin, water clones, in Cage Bunshin no Jutsu, shadow clone technique. With their kunai spinning, each one was engulfed in the fire that Naruto possessed. The clones of Zabuza were no match. They quickly found themselves back in the water, but Zabuza was able to get away in time. Naruto glanced around, but the man who had the audacity to refer to himself as a demon was nowhere to be seen. With his eyes closed, Naruto allowed his natural senses to reach their unnatural limits. Although there were indications of another presence as someone had been observing the battle, no evidence of Zabuza was discovered. Kyuubi gave Naruto the command, "Kid, you're at your limit. Power down right now," in his mind. "You had better come to me. We have things to talk about." "Yes, sensei," muttered Naruto. The strain on his body began to show as he felt the red chakra drain away. His eyes began to droop and his senses returned to normal. He lost the ability to sustain himself over the water as the yellow chakra vanished. Naruto lost consciousness prior to striking. Kakashi broke through the water's surface and swam up from the lake's bottom. After ensuring that Zabuza had left, he approached Naruto, lifted him up, and lowered his forehead protector over his left eye. Naruto was carried back to the land by him. Sakura remained too stunned to speak. What had taken place? She couldn't keep up with everything because it happened so quickly. Could Naruto have really been the source of all that energy? She was inundated with so many questions that she was unsure of where to begin. However, it had nothing to do with what had transpired when she first spoke when Kakashi set foot on land. Looking at the boy in his arms, she stepped forward and asked, "Kakashi-sensei, will he be alright?" Kakashi gave her a long look before responding. With Naruto in his arms as if he were sleeping, he approached them and said, "He'll be fine. He's just tired after putting out all the chakra at once." Sasuke kept a suspicious eye on Naruto. What had taken place? What was the source of all that power? And clones that could retaliate, along with those techniques and chakra wings. Naruto had never before employed those methods or even alluded to them. However, why conceal such strength and potent methods? Now, in order to murder his brother, he also desired to learn Naruto's secrets and acquire power. Mr. Tazuna, if it would be alright, I would like for us all to find a place to rest. Is it very much further to your house? Tazuna wrenched his gaze from Naruto in Kakashi's embrace and asked, "What?" He said, "No, it's not far, right this way." Sakura and Sasuke were at his sides as he left. When they arrived at the house, Tazuna's daughter Tsunami showed Kakashi to a room where he could rest Naruto. Except for Tsunami, who was preparing dinner, everyone was staring at him with anticipation when he returned. Sakura said, "Kakashi-sensei," with hesitation. She shivered slightly at the thought of Naruto's power and how it had frightened her. What happened? Was that really Naruto? He seemed so different. Sasuke continued, "I want to know where he got all that power and those techniques," before casting a suspicious glance at Kakashi. "Did you teach those to him?" Tazuna remarked, "I just want to know if he'll be alright." As they waited for Kakashi to respond to their inquiries, all eyes were on him. "He'll be alright, it's just chakra exhaustion. It happens to the best of us, even me sometimes. He'll wake up when he's recovered, but I honestly don't know when that will be. As for the techniques, no, I didn't teach those to him and I don't know where he learned them. But yes, that was Naruto, through and through. Anything else and you'll have to ask him. Please be careful, he may not want to answer, and you are not to pressure him." At this juncture, Tsunami's amazing timing arrived and she invited everyone to dinner. Kakashi refused to respond when Sakura and Sasuke attempted to ask him additional questions. Rather, he instructed them to rest since they would be doing more training tomorrow, Naruto or not. When Kakashi arrived the following morning to check on Naruto, he discovered only a note stating that Naruto had left for his own training and would return that evening or the following day. Kakashi was concerned that Naruto would be spending the night alone, but he wasn't overly concerned after the boy's performance the day before. The other two Genin were awakened by Kakashi, who instructed them to eat and meet him in the forest. When Sakura attempted to question him about Naruto, Kakashi had already left. Kakashi was waiting for them in the forest after they each had a small meal. Sakura was about to question him about Naruto when he announced that their training would involve climbing trees. "Okay, for training today you will be climbing trees." "Kakashi-sensei, how will climbing trees count as training?" He closed his eye and inserted his hand into the simple chakra molding seal, saying, "I'm glad you asked, allow me to show you." As if the ground were level, he approached one of the trees and proceeded straight up the side of the trunk. He proceeded along a branch and up the tree until he was above their heads, upside down. This training will help you master your chakra control, it will help you learn to gather chakra as you move, and it will increase your chakra reserves. All are important if you are to grow as a ninja. Kakashi released himself from the branch. He flipped over as he fell, landing on his feet. He vanished in a cloud of smoke after saying, "Use your kunai to mark how high you get each time, and aim to get higher. I will be back tonight to get you for dinner," he said. Sakura was reaching for a kunai when she realized she had neglected to ask Kakashi about Naruto. "Damn it," she said. When Sakura spoke, Sasuke was already holding a kunai and was looking at her questioningly. With a sigh, she turned to face her crush, Sasuke, who was blushing as he gazed at her. Do you think Naruto will be alright?" Snorting, "That idiot," Sasuke said. He didn't give a damn about Naruto, saying, "He'll be up in a day or two and jumping around like usual." Asking him about the power and trying to figure out how to become that strong himself was all he was interested in. He began to gather chakra in his feet and said, "For the time being, we should train. Let Kakashi worry about Naruto." She sighed and said, "I guess you're right." They spent the rest of the day training and running up and down the trees until they were barely able to move. It had been an hour or so before dawn when Naruto had left the house. He had been informed by Kyuubi that they would be visiting an old friend. Though a little apprehensive about seeing a demon like Kyuubi's old friend, Naruto nonetheless followed Kyuubi's instructions and listened to them. Kyuubi informed him that since he would have to use his demon form, now would be a good time to learn how to control the other demon senses. Naruto proceeded eastward as instructed by Kyuubi until he reached the island's edge. Fortunately, he could conceal the items he would not be taking with him in the dense mangrove forest. He removed his shirt and jacket, leaving his fox pendant on. Leaving his boxers on, he took off his socks and shoes before taking off his pants. Wrapping his jacket around his other clothes, he placed the bundle in a tree's roots where no one could find it and placed his shoes on top. Naruto only carried his fox pendant, boxers, equipment pouch, and forehead protector, which he fastened to his left arm. When he was finished, he began the transformation by moving to the point where the ocean and mangrove roots met. At first, fur began to prickle up through his skin, itching. When his ears began to change, the itching turned to pain. As the ears moved upward to the top of his head, the dull ache that had started changed to a sharp one. He clutched at it with hands that were morphing into paws, but he stopped midway because his face also changed. From the back of his head, a tickle spread down his neck. It moved down his back with increasing intensity and speed. There was a sharp jab and a tail that exploded through when it got to the end of his spine. Before the two agreed on half and the aches and pains ceased, there was a brief period of confusion between the human and fox forms. Naruto turned to face the source of the voice and discovered Kakashi leaning against a tree about 40 feet away. "So," he said, "are you still Naruto, or are you Kyuubi?" Kakashi asked without showing any signs of animosity, but Naruto could tell by the demon eyes that he was anxious and had a good deal of chakra stored up in case he had to fight. Naruto held up his hands to demonstrate that he was unarmed and acknowledged that he had developed sharp claws that could be used as weapons. "I'm still Naruto, but Kyuubi has been teaching me. I don't want to fight you, Kakashi," he said. He lowered his hands hastily. Kakashi stayed by the tree and watched Naruto with his normal eye while lowering the forehead protector over his other eye. "Can I trust you? Kyuubi is, or was, a very dangerous demon. You of all people should know this." Naruto pondered and looked for a way to reassure Kakashi that he would return and that he could be trusted. The forehead protector was tied on his left arm, and he found himself staring down at it. He turned to face Kakashi and said, "Kakashi, I am a ninja of Leaf. I wear the symbol. I swear to you, so long as I wear the forehead protector of Leaf, I will never betray my fellow ninja." Each word was pronounced to ensure accuracy. After a brief moment of eye contact, Kakashi turned around and pushed himself off the tree. He smiled at the kitsune and called over his shoulder, "Try to get back tonight, Tsunami's cooking her famous dumplings, and I'm sure you don't want to miss them." Naruto bowed and said, "Thank you, Kakashi," before diving into the water and flipping over. "Good luck, Naruto." Only Naruto's head and the tip of his tail were visible above the water as he swam out, heading directly west. He spent many hours swimming, occasionally changing his direction under Kyuubi's guidance. He continued swimming despite the thick mist that surrounded him after a few hours. He continued despite the pain in his muscles and the waves washing over his head. "Here we come, sister," Kyuubi said, speaking from Naruto's innermost thoughts. At last, a tiny island that was only a few feet across began to form in the fog. There was a small shrine on top of a small stone pillar in the middle of it, and 4 blue flames burned inside the shrine. A snake with 4 tails that hung down to the 4 corners was carved on top and encircled the shrine's peak. "This is the shrine of the 4-tailed demon serpent, Shibi. We are here so that you may receive her blessing and be acknowledged as my successor. Take a white hair from your tail, place it in the dish between the candles, clap 4 times and call out her name." Naruto did as he was instructed. Between the 4 blue candles, he dropped a white hair from the tip of his tail into the dish. He shouted the name and gave 4 claps. "What happens now?" inquired Naruto. He saw the smoke drift into the fog around them and the lone hair burn. Kyuubi said calmly, "We wait, change back to your human form, and rest. The call has gone out to her, she will recognize the chakra in the call, but she'll be coming from anywhere in the underwater world of oceans. My advice is to make yourself comfortable while you wait." Naruto sat down and began to change back, almost exactly in the opposite order from when he began. His face turned human and the fur vanished, followed by the tail going away and his ears returning to their proper position, until at last he was sitting on the little island wearing only his boxers. From his arm, he transferred his forehead protector to his forehead. He closed his eyes and took a seat in a meditative position. In order to stay warm in the cool mist, he directed his chakra to circulate throughout his body. Sakura was worn out. Her chakra control was fairly good, and she had run high on the tree several times. She was lying back against the tree she had been running up, breathing heavily, and covered in scratches from the branches that whipped her as she ran up the trunk, but her energy was now running low. She heard a grunt of effort and turned to look. Sasuke was staring up at his most recent mark after landing. It was high, at least 20 feet above the previous one, and he was beginning to feel the effects of the strain on his body and the amount of chakra he was exhaling. However, it wasn't nearly sufficient to stop him just yet. Sakura gazed in wonder as Sasuke began to sprint up the tree once more. He was so much braver, stronger, and more cool than she was. As she watched him go on, she flushed. However, That also brought back memories of Naruto. Standing at the lake's edge, facing a man who terrified her so much that she was immobile. Then he displayed a strength they were unaware of. And from what she understood, he was now recuperating from the stress of combat in that room, unconscious. She was concerned about him. Given how much stress he had placed on Naruto's body, even Kakashi had expressed uncertainty about whether or when he would awaken. When they got back to the house, she promised herself she would go check on him. Sasuke landed once more at this moment and turned around, braced for battle. When Kakashi emerged from around the tree, he lowered the kunai. Sakura said, "Kakashi," and rose. "How is Naruto?" Kakashi looked up at the trees and checked the kunai marks to see how high they got. "Naruto is fine, Sakura. In fact, he's out doing an errand right now," he said. "An errand?" Sasuke uttered incredulously. "Why isn't he training with us?" Kakashi made up the statement, "He is still recovering from the battle." Sasuke was doubtful, but Sakura trusted him. "When he returns, I'm sure he'll be ready for training." "When will he be back?" Sasuke inquired dutifully. Kakashi scratched the back of his head and said, "Yuha? Tonight? Maybe tomorrow? Yuha don't really know when he'll be back, but he said he would try for tonight." For a long time, both of his students gazed at him. Kakashi was unable to look them in the eyes. Sakura was concerned, but also a little suspicious, wondering what was actually happening and where Naruto might be. Sasuke, on the other hand, grew increasingly jealous and suspicious, believing Naruto was undergoing some sort of special training. As Kakashi had demonstrated, Sasuke scowled and turned back to the tree. After gathering chakra, he ran and began to climb. However, the mark was back down where his last was when he began to lose his footing and made his slash. He struggled to control his chakra because of his emotions, and he didn't get any better during the remainder of the training day. Sakura was similarly impacted, albeit more by worry than anger, but she appeared to be getting worse over time due to her limited chakra supply and emotional conflict. Kakashi scowled at them as he observed how easily their feelings overcame them. However, he was also concerned about Naruto at the same time. He eventually declared that their training was over and that it was time for them to head back to the house for dinner as the sun was setting. There was still no sign of Naruto when they got back to the house, and they began to worry, but not just about Naruto. In addition, Kakashi anticipated that Zabuza would be completely recovered in less than a week and would likely try to kill Tazuna again. While the two young genin trained during the day, Kakashi would stay with Tazuna. While they were eating, there were sly looks at the empty spot reserved for Naruto, but no remarks were made. Above all, Sakura appeared concerned about her teammate's situation. Tazuna reached over to place a hand on her shoulder after noticing how anxious she appeared. Calmly, "Don't you worry," he said. "He'll be alright. I have seen a will like his once before. He'll be back and stronger than ever." "Who will?" inquired Inari, Tazuna's grandson. Despite his limited speech during the meal, the young boy seemed genuinely interested in the person they were discussing. Tazuna answered, "Inari, you'll recognize him when you see him." Naruto was attempting to meditate in the interim, but his stomach's increasingly insistent growling was making it more difficult. Ordinarily, he would have dove down and captured a fish, but Kyuubi had cautioned him that it was a sacred place and that killing a fish would be disastrous. It was getting dark, and the fog had gotten thicker, if anything. In the end, there was no fog, no wind, no stars, and not even any discernible shapes. All he could see were the 4 blue candles and the little stone shrine. A wail that sounded like a long drowned out cry came out of the fog just as he was about to gripe to Kyuubi about having to wait so long. Since it was impossible to pinpoint the source of the sound, Naruto leapt to his feet and surveyed the area. Slowly, the sound grew louder, as though the source were getting closer. "Here she comes," Kyuubi said with a laugh. "Tell her to cut out the act and show herself." Naruto yelled, "Fouth sister," into the mist. "Show yourself. I will not play your games." Naruto made an effort to appear more courageous than he actually was. He was startled when the sound abruptly stopped and a woman's voice came out of the mist. The voice flowed almost unnaturally as she said, "Only a few beings have ever addressed me that way," with curiosity and amusement in her tone. The voice said, "You do not look like one of them," and Naruto turned to face the direction, beginning to discern a shape in the mist. "But something about you does indeed remind me of one of them." And it was his chakra I sensed in the call. "Who are you, boy?" On the exact opposite side of the shrine from Naruto, the figure fully emerged from the fog. Although it wasn't difficult, she was taller than him and, strangely enough, human. When she stepped up to the island's side, Naruto corrected himself because she appeared human but was actually standing on the water's surface rather than on the island itself. She had no clothes on, so her long, blue Green hair fell over her shoulders and down her back, hiding her breasts. Naruto quickly closed his eyes, preventing a nosebleed. He said, "I am Uzumaki Naruto," with his eyes still shut. "Could you please put some clothes on?" "Do you not find this form pleasing, human?" she inquired. Naruto blushed as she laughed softly and bubblingly. "All right, I shall agree to your request." Naruto was never able to fully explain another sound. He slowly opened his eyes when it stopped. It wasn't much of an improvement, but it was still an improvement. She was now covered by what Naruto assumed to be seaweed that had been combined to create a covering. Naruto examined her once more and saw that she had light blue skin with green scales on some areas. Her eyes were round, like a fish, and her face had sharp features. Fins ran along the back of her legs and along her forearms. She also had webbed hands and feet. Kyuubi remarked, "Don't let her fool you. In truth, she is a great sea serpent, sinker of ships, creature of legends, and the empress of the oceans. Now do as I told you." "Fourth sister," Naruto said to her once more, referring to her by the name Kyuubi gave him. Shibi gave Naruto a long, approving glance that left Naruto feeling more than a little uneasy. "As I said, I am Uzumaki Naruto. The ninth has selected me to be his successor. I ask that you call the Council of Nine." After giving it some serious thought, she remarked, "It has been many decades since the council was last called. Prove to me that you are ninth brother, Kyuubi's heir, and I will call them." Naruto nodded. He had been informed that she would most likely request evidence. Expecting pain, he gritted his teeth and closed his eyes as he put his hands together and began to transform once more. Except that, to a far lesser extent than he had anticipated, it never materialized. Even though the tail still stung a little and he could still feel every change, nothing hurt all that much. The only additional light coming from the four candles was his red eyes, which gleamed in the darkness as he opened his eyes and gazed at the serpent in human form. They looked at each other and did not blink for a long time. She muttered esoteric words under her breath and nodded before slapping her hands together in front of her. As the fog began to swirl, 8 distortions formed in an even circle around them. She clapped once more, and the distortions turned into water-based mirrors. Although each mirror displayed a distinct location, they were all united by the presence of a shrine. Each shrine had a different number of candles, ranging from 1 in a featureless desert to 9 on a pedestal encircled by lava that was blazing. Shibi stated, "The call has been made." Although she sounded sorry, she laughed when Naruto's stomach growl was the first reaction. "Now we wait for my brothers and sisters to return to their shrines. This may take some time," she said. With a flick of her wrist, her fingernails grew longer. "You are reminding me more and more of ninth brother. It is little wonder you were selected to be his heir." With unwavering eyes, she knelt on the water and observed. A fish was pierced on the end of her nails when she pulled up her hand after it had briefly darted down into the water and there had been some struggle beneath the surface. She said, "You may eat this," and threw him the fish he had caught with ease. A huge eagle had landed on the shrine, which seemed to be perched atop a mountain. "Fourth sister, what is the meaning of this?" the eagle asked. 6 long feathers hung from the eagle's tail, and 6 candles burned in the shrine. The voice was high, pitched but humorous. "Did you call on us to show off your dinner guest?" When Rokubi, the 6-tailed eagle demon of the mountains, asked Shibi, "No, sixth sister, this is of great importance to us all," Shibi responded. "I hope that is true," a voice at the forest shrine said. The forest's 3-tailed bear demon, Sanbi, emerged from the trees and took a seat in front of his shrine. "I didn't come here to watch someone stuff their face with grub." A ponderous low voice said, "Did someone mention food?" From the light of the 2 candles in his shrine, they could just make out the shape of Nibi, the 2-tailed demon mole of the caves. A prim female voice said, "Honestly," as a white tiger appeared in front of the snow-enclosed shrine. Gobi, the 5-tailed white tiger demon of the snows, sat down and gazed at the other people in the mirrors. "Is food all you think about, second brother?" she asked. Now, no fighting," a gentle voice said above the shrine with 7 candles, where the moon was shining brightly and the stars were twinkling in the twilight. Although she was considered to be one of her siblings, Nanabi, the 7-tailed bad demon of the night, was the ever-kind arbiter of disputes between the 9 and spoke to children as an elder. An additional voice said, "Then it seems that we are all here, from the land where the sun shone as brightly as a summer day." The 8-tailed demon lizard of the day, Hachibi, took his place, lying in the light, his white scales gleaming. "All," asked Sanbi. "I have yet to hear from first brother or ninth brother." "You spend too much time in your forest's third brother or you would know," warned Rokubi. At this point, she turned her attention from the eagle to Naruto. First brother was captured some years ago, or so my winds tell me. And as for ninth brother, the humans claim to have killed him a little over a decade ago, she said. But I doubt that is true. There was never a human or set of humans that could kill down our strongest sibling. Under the eagle demon's scrutiny, Naruto's tail twitched. He became aware that he still held a fish in his hands as his stomach rumbled. When he exhaled after performing a brief ninjutsu, a ribbon of fire with a fox's head emerged from his mouth and swiftly cooked the fish. Then, while the most formidable group of demons that man has ever seen watched him, he swiftly consumed it. Shibi briefly submerged herself in the water, but upon emerging, she was not the woman but rather her actual form, a long, blue sea serpent that encircled the tiny island with its shrine, its four tails constantly agitating the water. Naruto turned to face them all. That is correct, sixth sister, they could not kill him, he said. Naruto continued by telling them his entire story, adding, but like first brother, they have managed to capture him. They sat and listened to him. Initially, he found it unsettling that they were all observing him with their own sharp gazes, but he persisted. Throughout the story, they expressed a variety of reactions, including disgust at the way he was treated as a boy growing up, amusement at the concept of the ninja academy, and gratitude for the support of his friends and teachers. Naruto looked at them and listened as he told them about his life up to that point, seeing all of that and more through his demon eyes. Nanabe's whispered voice asked, "What is it that you wish of us, young one?" According to Kyuubi's instructions, Naruto answered, "I have been instructed to come before you and ask to take your tests to receive your blessings to become the full ninth." Sanbi used the back of his enormous paw to thoughtfully rub his chin. He said. "What you ask is difficult. You may have been granted demon form, but even I can tell that you are human, and no human has ever taken the tests for succession before. With Ichibi still missing along with the fact that you are not a true demon, I am not sure if you actually can pass the tests to become our ninth brother." The other demons were murmuring agreement. Hachibi said, "Oh, hush, all of you, look at Ichibi's shrine for a moment," as she turned to face the shrine of the first brother and past Naruto. Everyone looked around. The other demons silently observed as a sandstorm erupted in the desert, forming spirals and shapes in the winds. Naruto glanced, but he was unable to see what they were seeing. For a brief moment, it seemed as though a creature was forming in the storm. It was unclear exactly what shape it was, but it clearly glanced at Naruto and nodded. "It seems that even though our first brother could not make it, his sands have answered for him. He acknowledges this human boy and will let him take his test." Gobi said, "I must say that I am curious to see how this human boy fares," with a tone that betrayed her interest. "I second the vote for him to take the tests." "Humph," Nibi complained softly in his shadows. The mole turned to face Nanabe after looking around at his siblings, who all nodded in turn. "I don't see the harm in letting him try. What say the rest of you?" he asked. She told Naruto, "Child, you are so young," as she observed him from her twilight world. "Are you sure this is what you want? Why not think about it some more and come back when you are sure?" Initially uncertain, Naruto spoke resolutely, saying, "Brothers, sisters, I have had little I could ever look forward to. But this chance has presented itself to me, and I will take it. I will pass your tests. I will become the ninth brother." However, as he spoke and related his story, he came to the realization that his own desire rather than Kyuubi's was what had led him to this. The opportunity had only been made possible by Kyuubi. "Ninth brother chose well," Nanabe said proudly in her aging voice. "You have that same fire in your soul. I know you will pass them, and I await your time on this council." Each of the great demons then began to chant while holding an object. A geode that began to glow in the cavern was taken by Nibi. Sanbi grabbed a leaf from a green glow tree. Shibi picked up a scale. On top of a big snowflake, Gobi chanted. As she chanted, Rokubi picked up a feather that whirled in the air. Hachibi appeared to be holding a tiny star, while Nanabe appeared to be holding a patch of darkness between her two clawed hands. They all spoke in unison as the chanting abruptly stopped and everyone's attention was drawn to Naruto. A chakra fire encircled them all. Every item that the demons chanted over floated forward and went through the mirrors. "By these seals we will watch you during the next human year," they said. Naruto noticed that every object had a symbol engraved on it. They were the sign for each demon, he knew. The items were glowing brightly now, making it impossible to identify what the original item was. Through your action or inaction over the next year, you will pass or fail the tests. With each item striking a different location around the original seal that bound Kyuubi to Naruto, they floated in front of him and began spinning together before suddenly flying out and hitting him in the stomach. "Good luck." And gradually, the great demons and the mirrors dimmed. But Naruto wasn't looking. In front of the little shrine, he lay on the ground, clutching the spot where he was hit in the abdomen. Burning fists felt like they had punched him 7 times in the stomach. He sagged against the floor and passed out as the pain gradually subsided. Slowly, his body returned to its human shape. New seals were evenly spaced around the central seal that was applied to him at birth. The sand demon's mark was the only element missing from the circle, which also included a geode, leaf, scale, snowflake, feather, moon, and sun. Shibi's tails emerged from the water and encircled Naruto's body. As she began to swim back to the mangrove forest where she had dropped Naruto off, he was lifted up and carried through the air. She told herself, "You will do quite nicely, Uzumaki Naruto," before swimming back into the mists. "Don't disappoint us." Kakashi sensed it while assisting with the cleanup of the meal. After setting the plates on the counter, he made his way to the door. Sakura and Sasuke quickly rushed to their teacher's side after sensing it as well. To the west, a massive chakra was sensed. Even though it was so powerful that it could be felt for miles, it lacked any sense of malice or murderous intent. Sakura uttered, "Kakashi-sensei," in a tremulous voice. He was anxious, thinking that a chakra so powerful could not be human. "I know, Sakura, we all feel it," he said. The chakra's origin persisted in its approach until it came to a halt far away, across the island. It turned and returned the way it had come after a moment, until it was no longer perceptible to them at all. He quickly vanished and left the 2 genin behind, saying, "Sakura, Sasuke, stay here, I'm going to investigate." "Sasuke," Sakura said after they had been standing still for a while, watching the spot where Kakashi had vanished. "Doa, do you think Naruto had something to do with that?" "No," he answered after a pause. Nothing in that chakra felt anything like Naruto's chakra. Nevertheless, both of them continued to be suspicious because they could tell that Naruto was at the center of a significant event. After a short while, Tazuna emerged and observed the 2 of them. He didn't know why, but they seemed to be on guard. "What is going on?" the elderly man asked uncertainly. "We don't know," explained Sasuke. There was a long pause as he processed the information. "We felt something. Our teacher went to check out what it was. He should be back soon." "How about Naruto?" he asked. He sighed and slowly shook his head when they didn't respond. He said to himself, "I hope that boy is all right," and returned inside. Kakashi leapt from a tree and landed on the porch 20 minutes later. When Sakura saw what he was holding in his arms, she halted her hasty approach to him. For the second time, Kakashi was carrying Naruto into Tazuna's house while he appeared to be unconscious once more. Kakashi laid Naruto down and led him back to the room he had left that morning. Sakura and Sasuke had followed him, but they remained silent. They observed him examining Naruto. He had only worn Naruto's boxers when he returned. The remaining clothing was in a different pile. By saying, "I found him like this on the western shore," he was lying on the mangrove roots. He was clearly aware of their presence. Sakura and Sasuke noticed numerous marks surrounding a central spiral on Naruto's abdomen as he stood up to grab a blanket. Some of them had a seal-like appearance, while others were unlike anything they had ever seen. The seals began to vanish even as they made an effort to comprehend what they were seeing. The spiral and 7 strange-looking symbols were all that were left. It was then that Kakashi came back. He began to cover Naruto with the blanket, but stopped when he noticed that many of the symbols were gone. Naruto began to stir when Kakashi was tucking him in. He opened his eyes slowly and peered around. He gave Kakashi a hazy glance before turning to face the door where Sakura and Sasuke were. As soon as he realized where he was, he opened his mouth to speak. Kakashi listened, leaning down. After finishing, Naruto sat up and gave it some thought. "What did he say?" Sakura inquired anxiously. "Is he all right?" Kakashi said, "Oh, don't worry about him," with a smile. "He just wanted to know if there were any of Tsunami's dumplings left, and I'm trying to remember." "Idiots," muttered Sasuke. Sakura was confident that everything would work out. Tazuna said, "We saved 2 for Naruto," as she stood behind the 2 genin at the entrance. The elderly man said, "I'll go heat them up for him," and made his way to the kitchen. With Kakashi's assistance, Naruto managed to sit up. His strength was returning rapidly. As he stretched his arms, a few joints popped, but Sakura flinched at each one, as if he didn't mind the sound. When Naruto reached up to scratch the back of his head, he looked down and saw the fresh marks on his stomach. He grinned and slowly brushed over them with his other hand. "Naruto," he said, facing Sakura. He paused to consider a fitting response to her query. "What are those? I've never seen them before." Cluelessly, "Mementos, from my brothers and sisters," he answered. Feeling as though she had just said something inappropriate, Sakura stumbled, "I didn't know you had any family, Imina." He calmly replied, "It's okay, I just found them today, that's why I was away," with a distant expression in his eyes. "4 sisters," he said, indicating the moon, feather, scale, and snowflake. "And 4 brothers," he said, indicating the sun, leaf, and geode. "I still have to find my last brother," he said, gesturing to the vacant space. "But that is them, and this is me," he said, placing his hand on the big spiral at the center. With the fox pendant out in the open because they had all seen it, he reached over and began putting on his shirt and pants. At this point, Tazuna returned carrying 2 dumplings and a small plate. He brought a cup of tea as well. Naruto took them from him. As the boy removed the plate from his grasp, he inquired, "So, did you have an adventure today?" Naruto said, "Oh yes, did I ever," and began to eat. They waited eagerly, but Naruto appeared to be only interested in the mouth-watering dumplings. When Naruto reached for the second dumpling, Sasuke angrily questioned, "Well, aren't you going to tell us what happened?" Naruto said, "Can't," and he put it in his mouth. Sakura said, "What do you mean?" to him. Naruto said slowly, "I can't tell you what happened," after he had consumed the second dumpling. "Can't or won't," Sasuke said, becoming irritated, but Naruto merely chuckled. Naruto yawned and drank the tea. "Both. What happened is between family, so don't ask again," he said. With that, he lay down and pulled the blanket up to his head. "Besides, I'm tired, I've gone through a lot today, I'll see you guys in the morning," he said. Kakashi put his hand on Sasuke's shoulder to stop him from objecting. After they all departed, Naruto dozed off. Not even Kyuubi disturbed him that night. As soon as Naruto's room door was shut, Sasuke said, "Kakashi-sensei, what is going on? Naruto's been acting weird and I think you know why." Kakashi sighed. He had hoped that it would happen later, but he knew that it would eventually come to this. However, Naruto's actions and noticeable changes had significantly accelerated it. It was evident that Sasuke was not at all satisfied with Kakashi's lecture. Nothing is simple or easy when it comes to Naruto. "I honestly have no idea what happened today, but I can't force Naruto to tell anything he doesn't want to. You'll have to ask him, and accept what answers he gives until he's ready. Look, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but Naruto had a very hard childhood. He's lived in an orphanage most of his life, never known any family or kindness." The rest of what Kakashi told Sakura was new, but she had heard that Naruto had no parents. But wait, she thought to herself. What about his brothers and sisters, aren't they his family? Kakashi said, "I have no proof, and no actual idea who they are," slowly. "But if there are actually 8 of them, and Naruto is the 9th, Thina, well, let's just be happy that we only have Zabuza to face, and not one of them," Kakashi said theatrically. He turned and went down the hall to his room, saying, "I think I said too much. In any case, I'm going to follow Naruto's advice and go to bed. Don't think too much about what I said, just go to bed, get all the rest you can, there's going to be more training tomorrow." Sakura and Sasuke reluctantly left for their guest rooms, each with a different set of questions about the same individual. Sasuke pondered the events of the day, the odd marks on Naruto, and his brothers and sisters. Kakashi appeared to believe that they were more powerful than Zabuza, and he was relieved to be away from them. Were they truly strong enough to frighten their teacher? What did that make Naruto, if it did? Everywhere Naruto looked, the questions seemed to keep getting bigger. Sakura appeared to be more concerned with Naruto's history than with the events of the day. The fact that he was raised in an orphanage altered her knowledge of his upbringing, which had only been that he had no parents. She understood why Naruto didn't talk about his past after hearing about the treatment of children in such facilities. Since she didn't think Naruto would respond to many of her questions, she promised herself that she would learn more about his past because it might help to explain his current actions. Kakashi, on the other hand, had read one of his novels while laughing himself to sleep.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.